I'd like to call the June 30th, 2015 Longmont City Council study session to order. Could we please start with a roll call?
Mayor Coombs?
Here.
Council members Bagley? Here. Christensen? Here. Finley? Here. Levison? Here. Moore?
Here.
Santos? Here. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Okay, let's stand for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to start with public invited to be heard. And the first person on the list is Jason Lamb. So please come down and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Jason, and my address is 2000.
It's on. Just turned it off.
There we go. No, one more. There, it's red light.
Hello, my name is Jason, and I live at 2000 Sunset Way here in Longmont. I'm addressing the City Council today because I've lived at the Suites, which is run by Longmont Housing Authority since February. To put it shortly, the first 2 weeks I lived there, a leak sprang in my unit that caused a pretty big hole. With dealing with the Longmont Housing Authority, it took over 2 months to get the hole actually fixed. It's pretty much in the past now, that situation. They have fixed the hole. My concern going forward living there is that I've brought questions to Longmont Housing Authority regarding potential mold issues that I have concerns about when they do the reconstruction of the roof. They're haven't told us when they're going to start this reconstruction, but they're going to tear off the whole third floor. It's leaked at the Suites now since 2011. When they purchased the building, from the research I've done, they realized that the roof needed to be replaced back then. Just yesterday, they put a flyer on everyone's door saying, Aaron Angel, the portfolio manager, said in this flyer that, please rest assured that the Longmont Housing Authority is not aware of any mold issues within this building. The City of Longmont investigated this claim in April of this year, and they visually determined there was no evidence of mold in the building. Well, that investigation was basically asked for by me. I called the city code enforcement and I called the health department. Michelle Cogswell did an inspection along with Michael J. Ricken. He's the industrial hygienist of Boulder County Public Health. And I just want to quote her. She said that the roof at the Suites 2000 Sunset Way has defects that emit rain, causing dampness, deterioration in the interior portions of the structure, absorbable building materials, gypsum board, ceiling in Unit 7300 and fiberglass insulation of the third floor hallway have some visible mold growth. So in her report, she said that there was visible mold growth. The Longmont Housing Authority is telling residents there that there is no mold, that they have known of no issues. They've been informed by the Public Health Department and by code enforcement of violation of codes that they have at the building and have had for years. And the way that they've treated me is they focused on me personally and not the problems at the building, and I'm tired of them basically they've made me feel unwelcome there. I've lived there since February, and I've been told 2 times that I'm going to be forcefully evicted if I just don't stop complaining. I've been offered smaller units that wouldn't meet my needs, and instead of addressing the issues, they've taken the energy and focused it on me personally. And my fear is that with 4 years of leaks in this building, when they start tearing off that roof, that there's going to be mold spores that are going to be put into the heating and air conditioning ducts, and we're all going to be breathing that there. There's elderly people on the third floor with health problems, with breathing problems, and just the way that they have communicated and addressed the issue has not been forthright and honest, in my opinion. And I would like some accountability from Longmont Housing Authority. They've had this building since 2011, and I think that somebody should maybe take a look and audit them for how they've spent the over $3 million in revenue they've collected at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Terry Beshans.
Good evening, Mayor Coombs and City Council members. My name is Terry Bashans, and I live at 717 Snowberry Street. I would like to commend you for taking this incredibly hard situation on. Unfortunately, the need for affordable housing will be with us indefinitely. Rising income inequality is a fact. According to the State of Colorado 2014 and the Colorado Center on Law and Policy, Colorado is no exception. A growing share of state's income is concentrated among a shrinking share of households. In 2012, half of Colorado's total income of nearly $1.6 trillion was earned by the richest 20% of Colorado households. This means that one of every $2 earned in this state went to 20% of households, and the other dollar was split unevenly amongst the bottom 80% of households. To break this down even more, the Economic Policy Institute says that Colorado was among 16 states in which all income growth between 2009 and 2012 accrued to the top 1%. Between 2009 and 2012, income of those in the top 1% increased by 48%, while income of those in the bottom 99% declined by 1%. As one of those whose income has declined, I can tell you these numbers are not getting better. And trying to find an equitable way to fund not only affordable housing, but all social issues that affect the community due to widening poverty will be a huge challenge. There will be no choice. We as a society will have to ask those that do not need this help to pay for it. The money resides with those at the top 20% of income. The task will be to educate those in the higher income brackets as to who and why they must help those less fortunate. People all have preconceived ideas about who is needing this help. We as a community need to stand up and show that we are the elderly who work their whole lives, the disabled, such as myself, who worked until we became unsafe to do so, and the working poor who continue to work 40, 60 hours a week or more and still live below poverty level. I submit that taxing the general public just hurts the very people that need the help. Again, the only way to truly work this problem is to go to the money. Many different avenues will have to be taken. Public-private partnerships will have to be forged. Finding a way to have safe, clean housing that is affordable for most will not be simple. But for the continuation of a stable community, it must be done. Henry Ford said, "What's right about America is that, although we have a mess of problems, we have a great capacity, intellect, and resources to do something about them." I am asking you to please pursue all reasonable avenues to help alleviate the lack of affordable housing here in Longmont. You have the tools. At this time, what is needed is the will to move forward. This problem is not going away and will become more costly both in property and in people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Johnson?
I'm Cathay Johnson, but close. I live at 2000 Sunset Way. I'm Jason Lamb's fiance. We didn't know what we were getting into when we moved into that building where we are now. The housing authority has treated us disrespectfully. They have not been honest with us. They haven't been forthright with us, and it's just, they've been unprofessional and anything but supportive. And there's people there that need support far more than we do. I work for Boulder County. I like Boulder County, but I don't feel like I belong in Longmont. We don't feel like we're welcome there, and it's not safe. I've developed health problems, and my mental health is suffering dealing with this day in and day out. And it's a lady told me just yesterday, one of the kindest people in the whole building, she'd give you her shirt if you needed it. She said, "Just because I'm mentally ill doesn't mean I should be treated any differently." And that's completely true. And I feel that the people there, all of them, are being treated unfairly. And it is true that the housing authority has kind of made it an us against them sort of situation, because we're vocal about it, because people have said to us, we're afraid to say anything because we're afraid that we're going to be told to leave, and we don't have anywhere to go. And the same is true for us, but we just can't, it's not in my nature or Jason's nature to just kind of sit back and watch these things happen. And I know this is the case in a lot of Longmont and a lot of low-income housing, and it's attached to mental health also. I mean, one of the things that Longmont is really good at is they come together when really terrible things happen. And this is a broad terrible thing that's happening to a lot of people, and I think it's not being addressed as quickly as it needs to be. And of course, that's money. if buckets of money rain down on Longmont tomorrow, I'm sure that we would help some of the people that need it, but it needs to be higher priority. Mental health of people that live in Longmont, and housing is a huge part of that. If you don't have stable housing, your mental health is gonna suffer, and it has for us. And we want things to get better, not only for us, but for the rest of the people that live in that building and other low-income housing in Longmont.
Thank you. Ruth Walker. Okay.
Good evening, council members. My name is Ruth Walker. I live at 2526 Danbury Drive in Longmont, and I want to speak about the affordable housing issue. Once again, the city staff have done a great job of pulling together and identifying many options and many tools for you to consider to raise funds for affordable housing. And they have reached out to the community through developers, bankers, agencies who support many seeking housing, and consumers. You will have before you this evening a good picture of the situation. And without taking any action, it's going to be very, very bleak for the very lowest and the very highest earners in our community, being short some 2,500 units for each group. The tools and the options to address affordable housing are varied, from returning to the inclusionary housing ordinance to putting a tax increase on the ballot in November. Between those, there are many more palatable choices for developers and most likely our citizens as well. I trust in the shared creativity of council members and staff to take the work done by Kathy Fedler and her staff and the focus groups to move to action. Got myself screwed up here. I trust that this will ensure that there is funding and housing, up to 45 new units a year at 80% of the AMI, as well as some funding for those in the 30 to 50% AMI. Thank you.
Maria Deman. Actually, Maureen, yeah, Maureen.
Good evening, Mayor Coombs and members of City Council. My name is Maureen Denig, and I live at 1405 Clover Creek Drive here in Longmont. This evening, I am representing the Longmont Senior Citizens Advisory Board. We are an advisory board to the City Council, and we are here to address the inadequate housing situation for seniors and others within Longmont. Lack of adequate and income affordable housing crosses every segment of our society. We on the advisory board are here to represent the senior population in Longmont. The following information has been previously presented to the City Council, but it's important enough that I'm going to be repeating that. According to the 2010 census, 11.2% of Longmont residents are age 65 or older. In the state of Colorado, the percentage was 11.17%. As of 2013, it was expected to increase to 12.3%. According to information provided by Boulder County Area on Aging, between 2015 and 2040, the senior population between the ages of 75 and 85 will increase nearly threefold. The number of people collecting and living on Social Security or a fixed income will increase as well. One goal of the Longmont Senior Services and of the Boulder County Area Agency on Aging is to help people age well in their homes, whether they own or rent. The number of Section 8 vouchers are being reduced by the federal government, as well as fewer vouchers are being accepted by landlords. Price points have gone up, availability has decreased. People are forced to move out of town, away from their support system. There are wait lists for housing, and this is a problem shared by all agencies working to support income-challenged residents. What is needed are money, a key factor. Funding is needed to build, renovate, maintain, and finance affordable housing. Creativity, generating and using the money effectively. Partnership. The best affordable housing is created by involving partnerships between community organizations, local governments, corporate and lending institutions, and the philanthropic and religious communities. And commitment. This is a precondition for success. Commitment comes from within. The council should move the issue of income affordable housing to the forefront. Without income affordable housing, our community will become more uniform. We may lose the opportunity to interact with people who may be in different economic or cultural circumstances, to learn from them and to enjoy their company. Diversity is not just ethnicity-based. It also includes the young and the senior population. Thank you for your attention this evening.
Thank you. Evelyn Fontanas?
Hi, my name is Evelyn Fontanez, and I live at 1022 Venice Street, Longmont, Colorado. Dear Mayor Kuntz and City Council members, as a resident of Colorado since October of 1978, I have seen many changes in the economy of Longmont. I'd like to speak about affordable according to income housing in Longmont Boulder area. We all have a budget that we need to live by, no matter what your income is, and the number one rule is housing should be 1/3 of your income, and that is very hard to live by in the Longmont Boulder area. As a single senior on a fixed income, it is very hard to meet rent in Longmont. I do not want to move because all of my support is here in Longmont. My family, my friends live here, and I have been attending and very active with my church for 22 years. My medical doctors are here. Longmont is my home, and I volunteer within the community. I volunteer at the Hour Center, at the In-Between, and the Salvation Army for many years. I do not consider myself a low-class citizen. I worked for CU for 28.5 years. I pay my dues and taxes. However, it is hard to keep my head high when other people in Longmont look at me as if I'm low-class because I cannot afford $1,000 plus for a one-bedroom apartment. Please let's make Longmont a place where everyone can live by making it affordable and make it their home. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Alice, Thank you. You could tell me.
Hi, Mayor Coombs and City Council members. I'm Alice Alice, and I live at 1913 Tyler Avenue here in Longmont for 28 years. I raised a family of 5. Through church and civic activities, I raised my children to appreciate Longmont and to work within our community. I shop here. I go to the farmer's market. I do all the things that make me a good Longmonter, but right now, and I also appreciate that I was a part of the Envision Longmont process. Thank you. Thank you. But we're experiencing growing pains, and I'd like to talk also about affordable housing. The 2015 Boulder County point-in-time survey that has come out had 36% of the surveyors as brand new homeless individuals. Their number one reason for being homeless was an inability to pay rent or mortgage. 2 weeks ago in the Times Call, there was an article in the Sunday paper about the comprehensive programs in Boulder, a lot of programs that would help affordable housing and homelessness. It included the Bridge House. So the Bridge House will do a ready-to-work program and train people to work, and it has 48 units where people can live, and that's a drop in the bucket for our Longmont community. We at Hope, Homeless Outreach Providing Encouragement, are out every night feeding folks experiencing homelessness, 65 to 90 in numbers. 95% of them are proudly announcing that they are from Longmont, and they are very proud of that fact. But the faces are changing. Yes, we still see the chronic people, the people who have homeless issues for many years, but we're also seeing families and individuals. There are more cars, more people sleeping in cars. There's the plumber, the caseworker, the food manager, all with full-time jobs and not making enough money to afford housing. What the two groups have in common is a need for a temporary approved place to park or tent for the night while you, our city council, solve our affordable housing problem along with our community. Yes, camping is a code violation. Providing a sanctioned place will help people manage their lives instead of constantly seeking a place, a nook, or a cranny to sleep at night without fear of fines. It also just might keep them out of downtown doorways and off rooftops as well. I'm asking the Longmont City Council to come together and act on solutions towards affordable housing. Not the taxpayers. Come together, please, and act. I pledge that our organizations and our agencies working with individuals and families experiencing a lack of shelter, we will help and support you. I believe you can do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Charles Searles?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Charles Cerns. I live at 2982 Dunes Court. I'm also the chairperson of the Longmont Housing and Human Services Advisory Board. Over and over, as I sit on the board, I listen to various agencies throughout our community talk about their needs. And one of the common bottom lines is that sustained affordable housing is a crucial component of what it takes to make their program work, no matter what it is, so that there can be security, well-being, a sense of place, even for things like dental care, that you can have a home to put your toothbrush in. So these kind of things are important to the agencies that serve the clientele in this community, and it's to Longmont's credit that we have so many people working to help those people most in need. So safe, long-term affordable housing is a key to self-sufficiency. It supports individuals and families, and it benefits young and old. It's important to carry on the good work that we've done here in Longmont to meet the needs of those most in need. This includes the community workforce who face the challenge of providing a balance between housing, food, and the day-to-day necessities. And this seems to be a crunch point as we listen to agencies talk about their clients. That balance is harder and harder to maintain. Your direction will assist the advisory board that's charged with money that's raised by our taxes, and we disseminate to these various agencies, in suggesting to you the best mix of availability of community funds to be ensured that the best possible safety net for our city and for our city's residents exists, and that would include affordable housing. Thank you for your thoughts on this. It's a tough issue, and I appreciate the fact that we're taking this head on.
Thank you. David Edwards?
My name is David Edwards. I live in Niwot, 8414 Firethorn Court. I'm also involved with the Butterball Project at 150 Main. And my message to everybody is basically that we all here are in favor of affordable housing. The question is how to best achieve it. And I would refer you to some authorities on affordable housing, Edward Glasser and Raven Sachs, who have written probably the country's leading authorities on what drives the housing pricing. I will leave you with a copy of this article that I'm going to read part of. The message is, how do you do affordable housing and do no harm? One lesson for governments lies in the way that they help people who cannot afford adequate shelter. Billions are spent every year on affordable housing schemes, either through grants or by requiring a certain portion of newly built units to be sold or rented at below market prices. This latter requirement is, in effect, yet another tax on new building. So affordable housing costs something and somebody has to pay for it. And generally the people who pay for it are the people who are in the same income brackets but do not benefit directly from participating in the affordable housing programs. Very complex issue. That's my message.
Thank you. Gordon Pedro? Mayor City Council, Gordon Pedro, 2639 Falcon Drive. Last month, when you reviewed affordable housing reports, you were encouraged by public speakers to act with vision and courage so that Longmont becomes an exclusive, sustainable community. As a council, you provided vision by declaring that keeping up with affordable housing needs is a city priority. You also directed staff to bring back
best practices ideas for meeting affordable housing goals. Tonight you are reviewing a broad range of options from which you can establish a permanent revenue stream and/or methods to incentivize builders so that affordable housing goals are met. Your staff and economic planning systems have brought forward a comprehensive list of best practices tools. Now the community needs your collective act of courage as you determine which resources will be utilized. I encourage you to avoid falling into the trap of having 7 members of the council discuss and argue the nuances of each of the tools. If your goal going forward is to obtain 50 to 100 affordable units annually and/or to fund an affordable housing trust fund, you should use your time tonight to eliminate unacceptable tools from the list. Then direct the city manager to return in a few weeks with a multifaceted plan that will reach your goals using the tools remaining on the list of best practices. Since the city manager's plan should include potential impacts each of the housing elements will have on other priority activities, the city council will then be able to appropriately weigh the benefits and impacts of the affordable housing efforts against the benefits of other city activities. With increased property tax receipts, growth in sales tax collections from the redeveloped mall, and opportunities to reallocate resources as you complete budget reset efforts, I believe much of the funding for the trust fund can be found within current and future revenue streams. I hope to see a courageous city council tonight. The easy way out for you is to toss an increased sales tax ballot question to the voters and ask voters to decide a question we elect city council members to decide. The letter dated June 26, 2015 from the Longmont Housing Authority that's in your packet has many good ideas that should be considered throughout this process. I really encourage you to have staff take those very seriously. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Alma Collins.
I'm Alma Collins. I work at 2000 Sunset Way, and I'm also a Longmont resident. Over the past year, it has been my pleasure to work for the Longmont Housing Authority as the Supportive Services Manager for the Suites Supportive Housing Community. I would like to take this opportunity to thank City Council, the Longmont Housing Opportunities Team, and the community for believing in supportive housing and allowing us to serve currently 81 residents and provide them with safe, affordable housing and supportive services that help them remain housed with dignity and improve their overall well-being. After decades of study and experience, we know that the solution to homelessness is affordable housing, and that without it, homelessness increases. Often, community members express annoyance that homeless people are seemingly traveling to where there are services. In fact, we are creating a homeless population by pricing low and middle income earners out of the housing market. I am here to speak to the need we have as a community, as a city, to take steps to ensure that all of our citizens have a safe, stable, affordable home, as well as the need to expand supportive housing to those who need additional help to remain housed. Supportive housing significantly decreases costs to taxpayers by decreasing emergency room visits and hospital stays, decreasing interactions with law enforcement, and decreasing the need for emergency shelter. The National Alliance to End Homelessness estimates those savings to be $24,000 to $80,000 per person per year. At the Suites, we house a vulnerable population wherein approximately 49% of residents have a diagnosed mental illness, 39% have a history of being homeless, 17% have a physical disability, 17% are seniors, and 16% have an intellectual disability. The Suites, in partnership with the City of Longmont, mental health partners, and several other agencies, provides case management, psychoeducational and therapeutic groups, and social activities. Supportive services are provided holistically to address basic needs, dignity, self-worth, self-determination, mental health, addiction recovery, nutrition, budgeting, social skills, coping, community building, and forming relationships. Supportive services are provided mindfully. With the implementation of the supportive housing program at the Suites, we have seen marked improvements in housing stability of our residents. I invite council members to visit us at the Suites to see firsthand the success we have seen as well as the challenges we face. We all know that there is a dire need for affordable housing in Boulder County, and Longmont is certainly no exception. This is an opportunity for the city to take a stand and implement effective strategies for developing and nurturing present and future affordable housing opportunities as recommended by the Workforce Housing Task Force and the Longmont Housing Authority. In addition, I'm asking Council to look at ways to expand supportive housing to all recipients of subsidized housing in need of services in order to address the needs of all of our residents. By doing so, we will be investing in the future of our city and the health, safety, and well-being of current and future Longmont residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. John Peck.
Joan Peck, 1935 Spruce Avenue. Good evening, Mayor Coombs and City Council. I'm also here to discuss affordable housing. Excuse me. The shared opinion of many of you that the market will take care of affordable housing is flawed. Investors and developers are in the business of making a profit on their developments. According to a realtor who addressed this question for me, when the economy gets to the point where out-of-state developers or landlords can't make the rent they want because of the economy, the trend is to go into foreclosure, bankruptcy, or sell, not to lower rents to meet the demand. Long ago, when inclusionary developments were instituted, part of the thinking was to keep Longmont from becoming a class society. That is, no development would be open to only the poor or the very rich. This model worked well for Longmont, as our past city manager pointed out. It should be reinstated. However, inclusionary development does not address all of the housing problems we have. There are working class people here who need immediate help. Some are living in their cars, which is against the law. Some are camping by the river and in the fairgrounds campground. We should be ashamed that these people cannot find a bed in Longmont. We need a shelter immediately. I know that the city contributes to the Boulder County Homeless Shelter with the expectation that beds would be reserved for the Longmont homeless during inclement weather. Too many times there are no beds available, or Longmont homeless don't want to go to Boulder. Their concern is that they won't get back to Longmont in time to be chosen for a day job, or that their belongings will be stolen. The unemployed homeless need a place to get ready to apply for the many jobs that are being advertised in Longmont. Living outside limits the chances of being employed. I suggest that the city, on a pilot program, look into renting one of the many empty buildings in the city as a shelter. Perhaps the Walmart building near Hobby Lobby or the old RTD building on 287. The next housing problem is not affordable housing, but low-income housing. I suggest the city contract with a developer to build studio, 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, or tiny houses rented for a predetermined time on a sliding scale basis, managed by the Longmont Housing Authority or contracted by an outside agency. Many employed people are not making enough money to even get into affordable housing, and many fixed-income people cannot afford to have their rents raised and are being displaced. These are only some suggestions to get some real civil discourse around the issue. To wait until we have too many units built, hoping the market will determine the living fate of your constituents, is going to be irresponsible. Mayor Coombs, when you ran your first campaign, it was with the slogan, "A mayor for everyone." Now's the time to make that statement true. Thank you.
Thank you. James Johnson.
My name is James Johnston. I live at 619 Kimbark. Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. My landlord is selling the duplex house that we have lived in for 26 years. He bought it 3 years ago, and from that time on, he's been trying to get rid of it. But he gave us a 30-day notice that was up May the 4th, but the Housing Authority and our center and Center for People with Disabilities talked to the landlord, and he let us stay another month. And so now it's up July the 1st. We don't know what we're going to do because we cannot afford a house or apartment. We need a 2-bedroom at least, and I need one that is accessible with my disabilities. But we cannot afford this. It says that the rental says, we want you to have 2/3 of your income to be above the rent. I says, how can that be when the rent's 3/4 of my income? So I don't know what to do at this time, but I know that you have the tools to do these things. And I've lived here for 65 years. I've worked at the post office for 25 years till I got cancer and I had to retire on disability. I owned my own business for years. I supported this community. I volunteered as a chaplain at the hospital for 30 years. And I volunteered for the Housing Authority and several of the boards. I've been on those. But disability and Social Security is not enough to pay the rent that keeps increasing. We need a place to live, and I believe that you have the tools to do that. We're the people of Longmont are important. And I'm speaking for all the homeless because I'm going to be homeless soon unless I can find a place to live. And I can't find it on my income right now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Georgetta Johnson.
Good evening, Mayor Coombs and members of the City Council. My name is Georgetta Johnston. I live at 619 Kimbark Street, Longmont. And I'm his wife, and we were here. We were told to move on May 4th. Our landlord wanted us to move, but because of our center and the Housing Authority and Susan, the one over the affordable housing, and the Center of Disabilities, talking to our landlord. He's been real kind, working with us a little bit more. And as you see, my husband has disabilities, which a lot of illness comes to everybody. And we were here and told you our story on May 12th. I've lived here for 70 years, retired on Social Security, been married 53 years, raised 2 children, worked for the schools and other jobs, volunteered for the hospital, schools, library, senior center, and other community places. My husband has been helping. We've been helping our granddaughter and 2 grandchildren, and the social services took them out because they were afraid that the police was going to come and move us out, which was not very good. It was very embarrassing. And then my husband has volunteered for all these things, which he said he did. I feel Longmont is a beautiful city. You, the mayor, and the city council, with the resources that the city and the government receives, should use and be making it a wonderful place to live. Not letting people be homeless and high rent that we can't afford to live. We will be in recessions, what I feel, that the rent keeps going up and we can't afford it. And we want to do our part. We've always been in the city. We've been very good people to help out, and we want to continue. We are special, important, and shouldn't be homeless. And we thank you for listening to this, and I know that with all of us working together, I'm sure that you can come up with ways that help people, because people are important. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Helen Douglas.
Good evening. My name is Helen Douglas, and I live at 971 Reynolds Farm Lane. I'm currently working as a teacher in the St. Vrain Valley School District. I became a teacher 15 years ago by choice, wanting to combine my education and work experience from nutrition, chemistry, and counseling. I was thrilled to get my first job in this community and was very happy to become a teacher here. I immediately met with personal friends who were realtors and mortgage lenders, and I was devastated that I could not afford a home here as a non-entry-level teacher with a master's degree. 15 years later, I'm a PhD candidate in equity and ethics in science education. I'm still employed by the school district as a STEM coordinator, and I feel without a substantial gift from family members, I would still not be able to buy a home here, and my entry-level colleagues would not be able to as well. So I would like you to please consider these housing options so working professionals can live and do their jobs in this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Danos.
Mayor Coombs, City Council. My name's Bob Danos. I live at 1675 Stardance Circle here in Longmont. I'm the owner of Property Management of Longmont, PML Inc. We currently manage over 3,200 units in the Longmont area. I've also been a realtor in this community for over 34 years. I recently attended the focus group meeting on June 18th at the Longmont Association of Realtors office. My takeaway from that focus group was twofold. First, they need a solution. I have a solution for you guys this evening. I think we need to build more affordable housing, such as condos, which could occur in Longmont if council would consider the adoption of a construction defects law. That would limit liabilities and timelines of lawsuits. It's been over 12 years since a developer has built condos in the Longmont area. Cities such as Lakewood and Lone Tree have implemented such laws, and the city of Littleton is in the process currently. These communities are seeing an increase now in condo construction, a much more affordable avenue which would help a lot of the people who've spoken previously here. The second item I'm seeing is rent increases. As a property manager, I see a little different side of the reason for rent increases. Currently, the discussion that I got from the focus group was that the lack of inventory is causing rents to increase. That's only a minute portion of the issue here. While that may be a small portion, I feel a major portion of the rent increases are due to changes in hard costs. Insurance rates have increased over 22% since the September 2013 floods. Boulder County was being declared a national disaster area. Property taxes have increased over 7.5% this past year. The more rental properties we take out of the tax rolls as tax exempt add to such city-owned housing or Longmont Housing Authority's $40 million portfolio only perpetuate increasing taxes. Water, sewer, and storm sewer rates have all increased as well. All of these items contribute to higher rental rates. I feel the city can control some of these items that would make rents more affordable and housing more attainable. Thank you.
Brian Bear. Mayor Coombs, City Council. I'm Brian Bear, 7552 North 83rd Street. I'm also part of the development group for the Butterball redevelopment. Here tonight to talk a little bit about affordable housing. I support affordable housing, and I think that it's important for a community to have not only affordable housing, but a good mix of housing in the community. I think that's healthy. I've developed projects all over Colorado and in California, and my experience is that affordable housing programs tend to increase housing costs pretty much across the board. But one other thing that I've learned is that there's really no magic bullet for affordable housing. There's no set formula. And so I applaud Kathy and the team for really looking at a broad spectrum of different ideas and different solutions that could be brought to bear. There's no secret that we are at the beginning of what I think is a building boom. And there's a lot of things happening in Longmont. And as I go around and talk to some of the other developers in the community, and there's probably a half a dozen or more developers that are bringing a large portion of the next generation of housing to Longmont. If you ask them why they're here developing, and a lot of them, most of them are local, they'll give you a number of answers, but there's a common theme there that it's a great place to live, staff in the city are good to work with, and the costs of development are low. And so I would hate to see that change and change the dynamic and the momentum that's starting to be created with new projects. We're developing one of the largest projects in Longmont in a long time, and we'd also like to be more involved. And I think there's a common theme with the developers that they would like to be more involved in this process as well. I spent some time, attended a group for about 35, 40 minutes and went through some questions, but I think that there's more that we can give, more input that we can give. And so if you're going to bring a program forward and continue to study it, I would encourage you to embrace the development community and include them in the process going forward. Thank you. Thank you. Wally Grant.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I'm Wally Grant, and I live at 423 Bowen Street in Longmont. First of all, I want to say I'm proud of the council and my council and the staff for doing such a good job studying this issue. I guess first recognizing it, studying it, and looking for solutions. I think that's marvelous. I've lived here for a long time, and I've, during that time, watched housing costs rise much more quickly than income levels. And it's created a problem that you've heard about tonight. It's a problem that I think we owe to our community and to our residents our best efforts to try to solve. I think there are a lot of reasons for us to look for solutions. You've heard a lot of them so far tonight, and I'm sure you'll hear more of them later. There are two I'd like to mention to just put them on the table. One is I think that a stable community with a good base of affordable housing is a terrific asset when looking for economic development. I think that any kind of a company that might want to come to Longmont or settle in Longmont, and those who are here are going to want to be sure that their employees have a place to live in an affordable fashion. The second one is a little different kind of a reason. I think we need to do it. We need to address it because it's the right thing to do. I think we as a community owe it to those who live here, to those who would like to live here but can't afford to live here, to those who work here, to find a solution to this problem. And I commend you for looking for it. I also wish you good luck in finding it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rick Brew?
Rick Brew, 21 South Sunset Street here in Longmont, and I want to thank Mayor and council members for the opportunity to speak. I work with builders on redevelopment and development projects, and I just wanted to caution, well, one thing, I wanted to echo one of the previous speakers' comments about construction defect legislation and the problem that poses for building affordable housing. I wasn't going to talk about that, but I'm glad he brought it up because I know the builders we work with would like to build more condominiums, but there is a legal hurdle that I think the state is trying to solve but hasn't come to a solution for, and I encourage the city of Longmont to support a solution for that. The other thing that I would like to caution the council members on when they make a decision on this is some of the proposals would raise the cost of construction of new housing. And I think that it can be a hazard in that if the fees or in lieu of fees or taxes hit the people who are building the new homes for the community, it could raise the price overall for most of that housing, even though it helps out some people who get the affordable housing that is subsidized with those fees and taxes. And I think it's great that the city has reached out to the home building and development community in the with the task force as well as the study groups, because I think it gets some input into nuts and bolts solutions that I think would really work for Longmont and solve the affordable problem as best we can. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Terry Benjamin.
Good evening, Terry Benjamin. I live at 621 Gay Street, here for the affordable housing issue. I was driving over and it was like just the old Beatles song, Long Winding Road, came to me for some reason. It seems like we've been at this thing for decades, certainly intensively for the past 3 years, 3.5 years. And so it's great to get to a point where you're going to start talking about solutions. I remember a council meeting a while back. He said, let's get some solutions on the table, talk about them, figure out where to go, and get going. So we're getting close, and I look forward to the conversation tonight. You know, the needs are defined. There's been more data. There's enough paper and data around here to sink a battleship. And Workforce Housing Task Force, citizen surveys that you do every 2 years, cost of living, affordable housing, the input coming into the comp plan update. It is an issue that's out there that is needing attention. And so as we move into the solutions phase, you know, there are a host of tools you guys will look at that aren't money. You know, you got planning, zoning, land use, you know, all those kind of tools that are associated with guiding and managing development. But tonight, you're going to start talking about money. And so that's always a fun conversation because you got competing needs for limited resources. I have a strange definition of fun sometimes. So as kind of you dig into this thing, you know, I see sales tax keep coming up every now and then. And I just honestly, deep in my soul, after working on this issue for decades here in town, don't see a sales tax passing. My hope is, and encouragement is, for you guys to look within the city budget, existing revenue streams. I think the city budget's something like $300 million, $330 million, and find $1 million a year for at least 10 years and dedicate that to attacking this issue. That will be a substantial step in a positive direction that will generate local money that can be used to leverage many other dollars to create partial solutions to this growing problem. Michael, in his letter to you, talked about you've supported them to the tune, I can't remember, Michael, $5 million over the last few years, and they brought in $45 million, something like that. So those local dollars are so important. The final thing I'd like to say is that this issue is something that's going on in communities all over the country. In the context, I think, of the conversation is housing and affordable housing or workforce housing can no longer be thought about as charity. Let's see what we can come up with. Let's see if we have a few extra bucks in our budget. It needs to be incorporated into the planning and budgeting process just as other key city services are budgeted. So I'll leave that with you, and thank you all very much.
Edward Regal.
Good evening, Mayor Coons and members of the council. My name is Ed Regal, and I'm a chair of the board of the Longmont Association Realtors. I live at 3232 Mariner Lane in Longmont. In order to encourage the creation of more affordable housing, the Longmont Association Realtors supports the incentives identified in EPS Affordable Housing Policy Analysis Summary dated June 26. These incentives include expedited development review, height waiver, density bonus, fee waiver, offset, and reduction, fee delay until certificate of occupancy. Inclusionary zoning has proven to be ineffective in our market. We strongly encourage the Longmont City Council to consider any and all incentives rather than mandates that negatively impact builders in our community. We believe that the city will need a multifaceted approach with a menu of options if it intends to encourage the construction of additional units, both for purchase and rent. Let's move forward with a policy that incents builders and developers rather than discourages them from investing in our community. LAR is committed to work with the city and offers the expertise of our membership to help in the crafting of new affordable housing policy. I have a few notes taken from the June 26, 15th memorandum. The city should explore a local solution to the state construction defect laws that could spur for sale multifamily development. I know it's brought up twice already tonight. It is a statewide problem. I've been in Denver twice. I've been in traveling along. I was in Washington, D.C. twice in the last year. It has been brought up that it is an issue in the state of Colorado. Little current incentive in the market for additional density or height in development projects. Therefore, future projects were not likely to include them. The resistance to higher density development from residents was cited as a major barrier to pursuing these incentives. The group generated the idea of exempting certain purchases to minimize the impact on lower income residents, specifically exempting a tax on grocery or prescription medicines. Also, individuals expressed concerns about the political effort involved in passing a sales tax measure, concern that if it does not pass, it could be interpreted as a lack of community support. The use of property tax increase was less attractive of the two. The group felt that there needed to be approaches and tools that would put some burden on all groups involved, especially noting a broad spectrum of residents, builders, and city funds. There was broken down into...
I'm sorry, but your 3 minutes is up. Everybody's got 3 minutes.
Thanks for your time.
You bet. Is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to address the council at this time? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. I think since our next thing's going to be really long, why don't we take a 5-minute break right now?
Do we have any special reports? This?
Mayor, your first item will be presented by Kathy Fedler, our Housing and Community
Could everybody sit
Investment
down,
Manager.
please? Thank you.
Ms. Fedler will be presenting and leading the discussion on the follow-up on affordable housing program and policy options.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Kathy Fedler, Community Development Block Grant, Home, Affordable Housing Coordinator. So I am really going to turn it right over to our consultants. They have a short presentation that kind of summarizes things of where we're at, and then I think we're going to dive right into discussion. So.
All right. Thank you, Kathy. Mayor Coombs, members of the council. I'm Andrew Knutson, and with me is Matt Prosser. We're with Economic and Planning Systems, and we've been working with the city on both a comprehensive plan as well as this focused study of affordable housing needs and opportunities. So we have a short PowerPoint to walk through tonight with you. If I can get that out. And then we've got some questions at the end that we thought we could use to help frame the discussion. So to start with, review of schedule. We looked at previous work that the City of Longmont has done regarding affordable housing. We did a regional housing and needs analysis, and we compared it to the to previous gap studies that had been done recently. All of this was in May. We also looked at national studies. We have done and provided an exhaustive list. There's various organizations that are assembler of housing policies across the country, and we've checked with these, and we basically have included everything that is not that could be relevant in the state of Colorado or the city of Longmont. It has been a very divergent process, if you will, in terms of capturing everything that there is, and now we'd like to round the corner and start to make it convergent. To the extent that we can eliminate things that are no longer of interest or not feasible, I think that's helpful for everyone involved. We think that there needs to be some further calibration following this evening and the narrowing of the list in terms of what it means in Longmont in terms of production of units, generation of revenue, what have you, calibrating it to with potentially some stakeholder outreach to ensure that things really are going to work. But that's where we've been, and in terms of where we are tonight, on the next slide, we've got 2 bullets here on all of the findings. And for sale housing, the market's coming back. Production is finally starting to increase. The overhang from the recession has been eliminated. However, finding affordable housing ownership opportunity in the 60 to 80% range is very difficult, particularly if you look at it in terms of a time series. Concerning the rental market, very constrained, extremely low vacancies. I'm not sure any market in the state that we're aware of and have evaluated has vacancies as low as they are here in Longmont. 20% increases in rent in the last 2 years, and particular need in terms of a lack of affordable housing at the 50% level in terms of new construction. This next slide is the way we like to put together the understanding of housing, both separating it out for tenure in terms of for sale and for rent, and separating it out in terms of timing, breaking it out by catch up and keep up. Basically, we have 3 goals. Keep up for sale. The gap is 12%. Industry standards for the region are 10. Similarly, for the rental side, the gap is 19%. Regional standards are 10. In terms of catch up, there's not really a catch up need for sale, given the misalignment of income and ownership opportunity. However, there is a fairly sizable catch-up need on the rental side. 2,500 units at 30% and another 2,500 units at 80% and above.
Councilmember Bowman.
Thank you, Mayor Coons. Just quick question
Yes.
on your data. So in reading the packet, there's other numbers, and I just don't want to be thinking about this as you talk.
Right.
When you can clear it up real quick. I don't remember what page it's on, but there are, you compare Longmont to other cities in the area, and you basically look at how many affordable housing units they have to us, the totals, and then you also use percentages of total housing and what percent is affordable. Those numbers don't match those numbers. When you looked at what you presented in the packet, it looked to me like we were ahead of the game. But here I'm seeing gap 12 and 19, regional standard is 10. If the packet is accurate, how come here I'm saying that, what's the regional standard? Where's it coming from if the packet gives the impression we're doing better than everybody else already?
So I believe the information you're referring to is data that we helped Kathy and her staff pull together, and it's really just inventorying the amount of affordable units that are either deed restricted or income restricted that exist within the Boulder County communities. The gaps refer to looking at the percent of households by income level within the community and comparing that to the rent or sales price of new units coming on board and how those compare. And so the gap here in the KEPA is referring to income levels, and is there new product that's affordable at that income level? And so it's a different analysis. So and I think the analysis you saw for Boulder County illustrates that the city has done a good job of trying to, the city and its partners, I should say, have done a good job of trying to build an inventory of restricted income units. But they're kind of separate analysis.
Right. So my question is, that's what I was kind of thinking. So my question is, now looking at catch up and keep up. Catch up and keep up to me implies we have X amount, we need Y amount, so how are we going to go from X to Y, right? But the gap, what you just described, isn't necessarily that analysis.
They're integrated.
How?
For example, any given community could have a very large supply of units at a certain income level. However, if the population at that income level happens to be larger, there will be a negative gap, notwithstanding significant efforts to actually bolster the supply at a given income level, and which I think is true here. But these gaps are what's shown on this quadrant, on the 2x2 quadrant, to show what's going on locally relative to what's going on regionally.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I'd also say that the gaps for catch-up reflect existing housing or housing that's been built, from the beginning of the city, really. So it's inclusive of everything. And so the gap really here is rental housing at 30% and below.
Help me out. Actually, what I'm looking at is page 59. And I'm looking at page... Hold on a second. You guys do great giving us data. Love data.
And I think these questions are helpful because there is a tendency to get wrapped up in a lot of jargon, and that's not our intent.
I can't find the other one in the 200-page packet right off the top of my head.
It's on that battleship that went down, I think.
There was one where you actually compare, there's two, where you actually look at the total.
I'll play it later. Keep going. That sounds good. That sounds good. So back to the slideshow.
Councilmember Pinnon?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I had a question too. In your 2x2 here, do you also include the inventory that's in the pipeline now to be built? Is that included in this gap?
We've accounted for that in the overall analysis, but the gaps.
We don't know what price range the pipeline units are at, so it's impossible to compare, or at least not possible yet to compare how the pipeline units will reflect the income spread of households in the city. If it reflects what's been built in the last few years, then the gaps are consistent, will be consistent.
But you don't know.
We've done a time series to show how new inventory comes online and is priced. So it's a good indication of what's likely to occur in the future.
Councilmember Levison?
The one thing that 2 weeks ago, many of us were at the Colorado Municipal League conference, and I had some conversations with other council members from surrounding communities, and I know that Firestone has an incredible crisis. They almost have no multifamily housing, and so they're looking at being more aggressive to start building for rent apartments and senior housing. So since you haven't included them at all on your chart, what is the ramifications for Longmont when other communities start going in this direction too? We're going to have to constantly keep fine-tuning where we are with units because it's going to be a competitive market in other close-by cities where we know a lot of people commute to work in Longmont. So I didn't see Firestone on a lot of the lists. I saw Dacono, I saw Frederick, I saw Erie, but not Firestone.
We include Firestone within our analysis of home price data. But you're right, there is really no rental in those communities, so there's not really data to analyze.
Some of the data that we included in the analysis is captured under Tri-Cities too.
Yeah.
So that might be where it is.
And I would just add, too, that any policy that the city adopts and moves forward on, multifaceted as it will be, we're always going to have to do a comparison of what's going on in the region and do some adaptations and adjust for market here as well as regionally. So.
Okay, continue.
So in terms of goals, the council talked and generally coalesced around a goal to create 45 to 90 affordable homes a year, seen relative to annual production and what the forecast calls for through the comp plan. The city's looking to grow at 450 units a year approximately, and so this actually achieves a 10 to 20% goal. That's the number in terms of where to target that. We're looking at for sale programs targeted to households earning less than 80% of AMI, and rental programs targeting households earning less than 50% of AMI. This would be the keep up. So this would be as production continues. And then in terms of catch up, that's where the need is, and focusing that at the 30% and below.
So, as Andrew mentioned earlier, we did a pretty comprehensive analysis of all potential tools we thought would be applicable to Longmont, and we kind of grouped those into 4 categories, them being production mandates, so regulations that spur the production of affordable units through mandatory regulations. The next would be production incentives, so ways to incent production. Next would be city policies, and then lastly, revenue generation tools. So we took this comprehensive set of tools and we went out to 2 different groups to get their input on how effective these tools would be. We talked to a group of builders and developers active in Longmont, as well as a reorganized workforce housing task force group. I'd also mention that we did go to a meeting with the Longmont area realtors, or Longmont Association of Realtors, and we have since worked with them to get a more refined set of home sales price data that reflects a more geographically defined area for Longmont that's hopefully a little more accurate and also uses the wealth of knowledge and input that group brings. And so we're updating our information that we've provided within Envision Longmont to include that data. So this table here, it's not meant for you to try to read on the screen. It's in your packet. But really, what we did is we did some keypad polling with both these groups, and we asked on a scale of 1 to 5 how effective the different tools would be. And we took all the input from the 2 groups, and we have them separated, but we also combined them. And we gave them a weighted score, and to kind of see which tools rose to the top based on the input from these groups. And so this is really just kind of the final product of that, and I'm going to walk you through each of the different groups and the tools within those and talk about which tier, there are 3 tiers, high, medium, or low, the voting pushed these tools to, and also reflects input from our own analysis in terms of the effectiveness of these tools.
Just something to consider as you look at these numbers. This is input from the community, and I think it's helpful. At the end of the day, I think that it's council and EPS, we will advise in terms of what the optimal combination is. I also think it's interesting because there's a reasonable amount of consistency between the two groups. The RETA, real estate transfer assessment, comes out and ranks very low between the two groups. Fee offset comes out very high. Generally, there's a reasonable amount of correlation. That said, we certainly don't want to communicate or set expectations that these numbers are anything that should be set in stone. It's more of a helpful background to see how things sort out.
Moving forward, first we're going to talk about revenue generation tools. So in your packet, there was provided a pretty comprehensive set of different tools to look at, including information on pros and cons, where these tools have been used, how they work, and then kind of a matrix on how impactful they will be. So that's a good reference for you to understand each of these tools. We didn't working. The light was on, but
nobody knows.
Give it a shot. Yeah. Is it working now? No.
Testing. Yeah. Now it's working, right?
Yeah, it's working for you.
The magic touch.
There you go. Yeah, we'll just
all right.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to stop you.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
All right. So, revenue generation tools. So the two tools that really, I would say generally, there's a group of about 10 different tools we considered, and after looking at the voting, the majority of them were the lowest voted on by the two groups. Most of them were not considered as effective tools, but two that did rise to the top were the idea of a general fund set aside. So you, council, deciding to a certain annual percentage or a percentage of new increment of revenue into the city being set aside annually for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We also had people vote on three options in terms of a set aside, either a set amount, an annual percentage, or this increment idea. And the annual percentage and the increment were the two that were generally more favorable. Last was the idea of a dedicated sales tax, which had some support from both groups and was near the middle to the top of the tiers in terms of all the tools. Through our discussion with the Workforce Housing Task Force, the idea of exempting certain things out of the sales tax came up. A lot of people like the idea of exempting things like groceries that all residents have to buy. That way you're not increasing the burden on everyday purchases. So we had the city finance department run some analysis on potential revenue generation or the rates that were required to get either $500,000 or $1 million, and those are shown there. So it's almost 0.03% of percent increase to get $500,000, and then almost 0.06 for $1 million. So in terms of a reference, there you go. And then, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the tools fall into the bottom tier, and those are shown below. Next, we discuss unit production mandates.
So one thing, can you go back to the slide, the screen? So I thought document recording fees we could add a document recording fee, but that's different than the transfer tax that's not constitutional. Is that correct?
That's our understanding as well.
Okay.
Because the specific real estate transfer tax was one of the things that was called out in the Bruce amendments from years ago as prohibited.
Okay. But when you say document recording fee, would it just be for real estate transactions? Would be document recording fee on transfer of title of vehicles for anything major like that?
Right.
All right.
And as I go through this, there's additional commentary and thoughts that we tried to capture in the memo to you that we can bring to light in our discussion from the two groups. So I'll try to summarize some of that, but there is more. So the more we talk about it, there might be additional points to consider. Next was the unit production mandates. all of these scored fairly low in terms of their effectiveness rating based on these two groups. The only one that kind of rose to the middle tier was the idea of an inclusionary housing ordinance, or targeted IHO, if you will. The idea of commercial linkage and residential linkage ranked fairly low. Thank you. Next was unit production incentives. This group of tools had a lot more receptivity from the two groups. Fee offsets and fee waivers, something that the city already does currently, were among the top two for both groups, and something that the development community felt had the most value, economic value, in terms of ways to incent them to provide this affordable housing. Other ones that were in the top tier included fee delay and fill certificate of occupancy. So the idea of waiving affordable housing in lieu fees from building permit issuing to when you get a CO, so that way the developer doesn't have to carry the cost through construction and can build that into their permanent financing. Next is density bonus or height bonus. These are interesting tools and could be effective. Density bonus is already provided by the city, but has been used sparsely. We've actually, from what we've heard from staff, is there's often not many developers that are looking for additional densities. Often they're looking to develop less than what the average density is called for in certain zoning districts. So it's somewhat difficult to figure out how to make a density bonus work in some areas of the city, but it's also a pretty easy program to implement that has limited to low costs. So easy thing to do, hard to make effective. Middle tier, we're looking at expedited development review and development standard variance. The city also already provides development standard variances already for several things, not just affordable housing. And then last was parking reduction, that scored the lowest. And then we're looking at policy tools. So these are things that you, City Council, can do to try to incent or raise revenue for affordable housing. The top tier included the use of tax increment financing. There's a few different ways to try to use TIF for affordable housing. There's the approach to use TIF on project-specific basis for affordable projects to help use the increment to close the gap for development projects. An idea that came out of the development group was also that often in TIF projects, the debt is retired for the project before the 25-year clock is expired. And so the idea was to use the additional years between when the debt retires to the 25-year max and use that increment towards affordable housing. The next tool, city investment requirements. So whenever you, the city, decide to provide funds to make a project happen, like building a sewer line or putting in a street, something that's above and beyond what you would normally do for development projects, in return, you would ask for development to include affordable housing units within that. And then next is the idea of an affordable housing easement. So this is an effective tool to try to preserve your existing affordable stock. So a lot of tax credit projects that are coming off of their timeline to be deed restricted, you could use funds from your trust fund to place a permanent easement on that property to keep the units permanently affordable. The middle tier includes the idea of rezoning requirements and annexation requirements. So when a development comes in for annexation approval, you can require providing affordable units within an annexation. And then there's also the idea of using rezoning. So, for instance, if there's land within the economic development industrial land zone, if they want to do housing on this property and rezone it to housing, you can require affordable housing units to be built as part of that rezoning. And then none of the tools under this set actually scored in the lower tier.
None of what?
None of these policy tools within the voting were in the lower tier. So they all were either middle or high.
So we just have a few more slides, and I want to point the attention of our group here tonight to the memo that went out in the council packet. Page 10, we've got some feedback summary. So we tried to capture what we heard in these groups so that you would have a fuller understanding of the discussion and not just a numeric output. Construction defects came up. We certainly, anything that we can do collectively to solve construction defects is going to be time well invested. We can talk a little bit more about incentives, what works, what doesn't work. We're doing an extensive study for the City of Portland right now on their incentive program and what actually gets traction with the development community. Some things do, some things don't. So we can talk more about that if you've got questions. Also, something, a couple details here in the feedback, but something we don't want to lose track of is one participant suggested the idea of using revenue generated from mineral leases on city-owned land. That was an out-of-the-box idea that may be of interest. Also, just to reemphasize the notion of the sales tax, the housing group talked about ways to alleviate the burden on the members of the community that have the fewest resources. And exempting groceries and pharmaceuticals was one of the ideas to try to ease that burden. And I know that was talked about a fair amount the last time we were here meeting with you. So important modification to that concept. Looking at the slide here, one of the things that we want to talk about is increasing the production of a diverse housing stock. Diverse housing stock can only help create more affordable solutions. And whatever the city can do along those lines, and this is particularly relevant on rezonings or annexations. And the goal ultimately is to create diversity that over time creates a broader spectrum of housing options. I want to talk just a little bit about the whole notion of a targeted inclusionary housing ordinance and one that's combined with incentives. We worked with the city of Denver recently to create tiers where some parts of the city are exempt basically from IHO or are all the city is subject to different IHO standards, some high, some medium, some low. And the low threshold is fairly minimal. The high threshold is actually pretty significant. And the city was finding that where it needed employees the most and where it needed a diversification of opportunity the most, there was absolutely no construction going on, and all the developers were cashing out of the requirement. So this has not only higher standards, but also higher subsidies from the city to help developers close that financing gap. And that's something that I think we want to talk about tonight is the whole notion of setting standards, because how do you use all the resources of the community to effectively address the problem? In some ways, you don't, in our opinion, you don't want a whole lot of money without the expertise of the development community who can implement. There's a tremendous amount of expertise in the community with all the builders who can actually take things vertical, understand sales, marketing programs, how to close units. I mean, the whole range of the development activity that some people might take for granted is actually very complicated. And there are people who do that very well here. How do you tap into all that expertise, but also help with a variety of incentives, some policy-based, some financial? Some communities are actually writing checks and providing financial incentive to help close that gap. And that's certainly worth a direction we think is worth pursuing. So it's kind of integrating everything. It's integrating the policy in terms of annexation and rezoning. It's bringing IHO back in, potentially in a targeted way. It's also bringing IHO back into the picture, bringing in the development community, but also supporting them with some financial incentives. So we have 2 more slides. And we've got discussion items that we think are a good point of departure for council. Basically, what we have on the screen here, what tools are appropriate for Longmont, whether they be revenue generation, production mandates, production incentives, or city policies. What's the appropriate target for an annual housing fund in terms of a revenue generation? What kind of a production target is reasonable? What kind of incentives work best? And what's the combination that's the most effective? Last slide, and then we're open to help answer questions and clarify what the path forward looks like. In terms of next steps, we think that hopefully we can do a little narrowing of the options tonight. There may be some calibration and additional research that's needed. I just want to point out on page 16 of the memo an understanding of what works, whether it be unit production, revenue generation, understanding the effectiveness of incentives, understanding the pros and cons to the city and developers, Potentially, and finally, additional outreach with the development community to calibrate tools. We certainly think that something along those lines, some additional stakeholder outreach would be helpful, and we're up for that challenge. So that concludes our presentation. We're certainly here and available to answer questions and be of any assistance as you talk through the options.
Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Going back to my earlier question, page 5 is what I was referring to. If you'll go to page 5. So as we're launching into this, and I couldn't find it because I was looking through all the data and it was in the summary. But my question is, as we start talking about this, I think we all agree that we want to do more. We'll never be able to meet demand, and we keep talking about gaps and struggle to find, well, what numbers do we use to come up with what we should do, whether it be supply, demand, etc. So my question is, as we're talking here today, that little graph right there on page 5, when it says percentage of rentals that are affordable and percentage of total housing units that are affordable, this is the graph that I wanted to know, how does it relate to the gap. So I'm going to ask the same question because I was too stupid to get it the first time. Okay, and that is, it looks like Longmont, percentage of rentals that are affordable, it looks like we're doing okay. Is also, not to say that we don't need more, and we're not going to tackle the issue. I just want to understand. So it's saying that we are at 7.3% of total housing units that are affordable versus everybody else in the area, like Nederland, Lyons, Louisville, Lafayette. Other than Boulder, we're second highest as far as grades for percentage. So again, I'm still not understanding the gap analogy. So when you say that we need 2,500 units, are you just basically saying right now if we had 2,500 units, everyone would have a home? Or are you saying compared to the region, which is what the impression I got, then we'd catch up to speed? Or we'd be caught up? Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, I think generally, so that analysis is really looking at what percent of households are deed restricted or income restricted, so therefore deemed affordable. When we're thinking about gaps, we're looking at all households in Longmont and what income level they're at, and we're comparing the supply of households within Longmont at different price points and seeing where they align. And so the gap refers to, you have households that earn between 30 and 50% of AMI, and there's 500 of those, but there's only 300 households that are affordable in terms of price or rent at that level. And so the difference between those is the gap.
So in other words, we're top heavy in some.
Yeah.
So total, we're doing awesome.
Yeah.
But we might have a lot over here, but not very much over here.
Right.
And so we're trying to figure out how to smooth it out.
Yeah, it targets certain areas.
Okay, that makes sense. See? Now, can you please give your presentation again? Because that's all I was thinking about. And then, and so what, anyway, I'm going to let my fellow council members speak first on this one. I've got my own ideas that I'm pretty stubborn about, but go ahead, guys.
Councilmember Pleasanton.
I am trying to understand the Denver, the page that Kathy sent to us that had to do with the Denver summary of modifications made to the City and County of Denver's IHO program. And it says here that this was overlaid with the proximity to transit, which I'm not really understanding why, because it has to do with affordable housing. So in determining where they would fund things, it was overlaid with the proximity to transit, and people who had less than 30% coverage received 0 points. It would seem to me they would need the most points.
Right. So,
and also the people who had the lowest home prices also received 0 points.
Okay, so what we were trying to do is take the approximately 50 neighborhoods in the City and County of Denver and turn them on or off in terms of their being subject to the IHO standards. And the two criteria that we ultimately focused on was the cost of housing and the availability of good employment opportunities, if you will. And the availability of good employment opportunities was based on either the number of jobs in a given neighborhood or the ability to get to a transit stop, to get on transit, fixed rail, to get to an employment destination. And we calculated the area within each neighborhood that was within a quarter mile of a transit stop. And if the area within that neighborhood was over a certain percentage, that turned that criteria on or off. But in a nutshell, I mean, there's a lot of number crunching in that exercise, but in a nutshell, basically, we help the city identify where would be good locations for affordable housing.
But doesn't this seem to imply that the people who are the poorest, who are the furthest, who don't have access to transit and have low?
Oh, no. What was going on was that the development community was fulfilling their mitigation requirements by seeking out areas in town that had the lowest market prices.
Mm-hmm.
And if all you're doing is meeting the market price, if you're fulfilling the city objective by going to a certain part of town where it's cheapest to do it, it's a workaround the goal of actually integrating housing where it's needed most. So we took neighborhoods off the table that were really low cost because we wanted the fulfillment to go into high cost areas.
Oh, I see, to create more diversity.
Right, exactly.
But then it doesn't actually solve the problem of, I mean, that solves one problem in creating diversity, but it doesn't solve the immediate problem of poor neighborhoods who most need more housing are not getting it. It would seem to me from what I understand here.
Or just to rephrase it, some neighborhoods, especially in Denver, actually the market rates are currently affordable. And as you can imagine, there are some parts of Denver that are very affordable because they're a little worn around the edges. Yeah. So, and it was trying to pull the IHO mitigation out of those parts of town into parts of town where actually people can't find affordable housing.
And in the meantime,
Okay, I understand that, but I understand that logic, but
hopefully it would spur development within those kind of lower affordable areas, since they no longer have the IHO requirement to meet. So they're not subject to it anymore. So hopefully it spurs development of market rate units, which are basically affordable in those areas.
is there any indication that that's happened?
Well, it's interesting because Habitat for Humanity no longer has to comply with IHO regulations. I mean, as an example, it's anecdotal, but they were finding that the neighborhoods where they wanted to be most active, now they are not subject to that.
That's good. They're a wonderful organization.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that explanation.
Councilmember Robinson.
Some of the things that I guess if we're going to start checking things off, I would have loved to have just one matrix on a piece of paper, maybe a voting sheet. We could have just done and see where we ranked. But I also find that it's problematic when we go out to the community and we get 12 people coming to a meeting and 18, and those 40 people determine all those numbers. I think that, everybody that was there certainly had a stakeholder interest, but I think that what we failed to meet is, Mr. and Mrs. Smith on the street. And I've gotten a lot of, anecdotal feedback from, regular people saying, we don't want a bunch of blah, blah, blah type of housing, but it seems like we do need certain types of housing that people may not want in the community. So I just want to say that, we might be, with some of our processes, becoming even more disconnected to doing that better communication piece with engaging people. So that said, one of the things that I found pretty remarkable, and I appreciate, I'm just trying to find where it is on the affordable rental housing map, I find to be very interesting. And I would like to, if we're going to start checking things off, I would like to really look into that issue of having an easement to continue affordability on the units that are going to expire. And I'm thinking, because they're already affordable, having an easement a lot of people can understand because there are conservation easements on farmland. Basically, you buy up the development, the increase of the development potential on them. So I would agree with that. I do not agree with sales tax. I don't agree with the property tax. But I do agree that we perhaps should consider doing targeted inclusionary zoning. I also think we have to be cautious about when we're doing rezoning to not overburden certain areas of town that are uncovenant neighborhoods. I mean, if we're going to look at densifying and upzoning neighborhoods, we're certainly have to apply it equally throughout the city. And I think eventually every part of the city is going to become redeveloped because we don't have that much land mass left. And then taking a percentage of revenue out of the general fund, just like we found with our current policy on social service contracting, we have the set percentage. It does not in any way reflect the need in the community. So when we hit the recession, we actually had more need for social services, but the budget for that went down because our budget was constrained. We were cutting the budget. So it's almost an inverse of what you need in a budget for what your needs are in the community. I also don't, I think that we have conflicting and equally important items in the budget, and to look at this as maybe the sole revenue source is not equitable to other city operations. So I would want to make, if we were going to go down that path, I would not go down that path right now. And I also do not want to continue to devote 100% of any CDBG money we get just to housing. I think there is a significant community benefit for using CDBG money in creative ways, such as for economic development and job creation, to encourage small business development, specifically entrepreneurial activity. And a lot of it could be with people that are 80% AMI. People have a misperception that the entrepreneurial community are all multimillionaires when they start. They're not. But I think there are a lot of good people working hard with great ideas. We have to encourage that. I also think the stability in the housing market from the federal government is going to continue. The budget's going to continue to decline, and we should not look at the federal government to be a resource, but then look to encourage the state to take up some of the slack. And then on the issue with the TIF, the current TIF legislation that I think passed is pretty restrictive when it comes to if you paid your debt off before the 25 years. Pretty much you're not allowed to do, I mean, the recent legislation will not allow us to do anything else with the money. And I also think that when council is defining or looking at TIF projects, that we really do want to pay off that debt, and once it's paid off, the benefit to the community is that increment comes back into the city coffers. And so if something like that would happen, you could certainly have a council that would target that increased revenue towards housing. But to tie it to the TIF, I think it's going to muddy the waters. It's going to, throw some other carrot in the stew to approve a TIF that may not be appropriate. Those are just my first ideas.
Do you mind restating your thoughts around rezoning? I wanted to make sure I caught that correctly.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I think that there are certain neighborhoods that you could look at neighborhoods that are maybe R1 and R2 that are not covenant restricted neighborhoods, and there are many of them in the city, especially in the older parts of the city, and to just decide that we're going to upzone those neighborhoods that might be very stable, single-family neighborhoods will cause a perhaps decline in property values, because people will then start looking at ripping these houses down, upzoning it, and then the social integration of the neighborhood will be from having this stable homeowner base to simply multifamily housing of rentals, which we know that renters are only looking to be invested in the community or in that neighborhood for as long as their lease is. And so we don't want to destabilize neighborhoods to reach another goal. And I think you could have a very serious negative effect on some of these older neighborhoods where there, according to your data, there's some really good single-family affordable housing stock for people making 80% of AMI. So you don't want to twist things the other way. And any neighborhood with a covenant, I guess you should look at neighborhoods that are covenanted and see where your possibilities are.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I would once again say that I am all in favor of the construction defects fix that other cities have done. That's something we can do right away, and it's something I think that will make a difference in the long run, especially in diversifying our housing. I also, I'm okay with the general fund set aside with a percentage of the new increment of new revenue. I would be in favor of that. Unit production incentives, I'm for incentives as a general rule. And I do think we also need to look at our comp plan, the way that we're going about our comp plan and what we can do to encourage more diverse housing in the comprehensive plan. I am not in favor of blanket inclusionary zoning, but I would be okay. I have been persuaded that inclusionary zoning for density and height exceptions could be effective if perhaps there were some increase in incentives in that area. Those are my first thoughts. I think the groups that you went to did a good job of telling you how the community at large feels. I know it's a small group, but I think that they were a good group and a good cross-section and a knowledgeable group about this issue. So I'm okay with that. But I really think some of these things we can do right away, and we should.
I'm sorry to weigh in here. I agree with just about everything that Councilman Alfano just said. I do think that we should probably consider construction defects to give us more condos built. Even though I've been on the opposite side of that with personal experience being a condo owner that got screwed by an unscrupulous builder, but not in this state, but in Nevada, but it does happen. I think I like the idea of the general fund set aside. I don't know if it should be a fixed amount or a certain percentage. I don't want to rule out, maybe at this point, maybe we don't go to a sales tax for this year, but I wouldn't want to rule that out in the future. I'm just curious, if it was a small percentage, you just wouldn't supply that percentage to groceries and medicine for everybody, but then everybody else, because you really can't define when someone goes to the store whether they can afford it or not. I mean, it has to be across the board.
One clarification, the city does not currently charge sales tax on pharmaceuticals.
Okay.
But the grocery is an option too, and it would apply uniformly to to everyone.
Yeah, I'm still kind of mixed feelings on that, but if we can't close it any other way and the voters want to do that, I would suggest waiting. I think 2014 is too soon, and we don't know how much we need to close the gap, or if we need to close the gap if we do all these other things anyway. I just don't want to take it off the table totally for potentially 2016 at this point. And I do like the idea of possibly targeted, in some areas, inclusionary zoning with the appropriate incentives and offsets to see if we could, essentially get housing built where we need it and diversified across the city. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I personally think the first thing we should do is just pass a motion that instructs the city staff to establish an affordable housing fund.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you eat an elephant?
Yeah.
You basically one bite at a time.
Right.
So I say we.
Yeah.
I know we will. But I'm just saying. No, that's fine. But I'm just saying that I'm not talking about the one that we're talking about how to fund it and all these new dollars, etc. I understand we have one. We're talking about we have a VW Bug, and we need a new car. Not that VW Bugs are bad. I guess they can be new. I mean the old one. I'm picturing like a Furby. But so I think that's what we should do. One. Now the other thing is that we've hired consultants. I've expressed to both of them. I think they've done a great job. I think that in gentle ways, they told us that Aspen, Vail, San Francisco, and cities where they're turning people away in droves, basically they can get away with mandates. And cities such as Longmont and others where, we're still growing and finding our way, incentives are the way to go. So I think that we should establish a new fund. I think that we should look at the incentives approach, all of them. I think nothing should be off the table. I also think that using the word inclusionary zoning in this particular community that we live in is an ideological, hot button, as well as asking for political turmoil. I am not for the inclusionary zoning that existed previously in the city, because basically that was a de facto tax on builders, and not all builders, contrary to belief, are rich. Just like not all lawyers are rich, or not all real estate agents are rich, or all mechanics are rich. There's good ones, there's bad ones, and there's successful ones, and there's not successful ones. So, but I would be for the traditional definition of inclusionary zoning, which is if they are willing to provide affordable housing, the city in exchange will provide those incentives. Density bonuses, height and variances, etc. I also think that I'm a little confused. I'm all for this construction defect idea, but I don't know where Eugene is. If you're he's not here tonight?
There he is.
Oh, hey, Eugene. Mm-hmm. So is it even possible? I mean...
Yeah, other cities have done it.
No. I know that other cities have done it, but as an attorney, if I build something in Denver and the city council has passed an ordinance, that, doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to hold up. So is that even possible for a city to basically circumvent state law and say, hey... No, I know that it's possible to, I understand that it's possible to create an ordinance. I want to know if it will have legal effect.
What is, and that'll have to be judged later.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Eugene May, City Attorney. So those are reasonably new ordinances. They haven't been challenged yet.
Okay.
So until a judge says so, those are in effect. I think that everyone recognizes there's many unresolved issues, home rule issues versus statewide, and so it's definitely an uncharted area.
Okay, so it's something we could do, but it's not a fix-all right now. It's kind of question mark how effective it's going to be.
It would certainly be a new area.
Okay, so I'm for that, but just keeping in mind that we don't know how that's all going to end up. We've been down that road before with the state and whatnot. I also think that the rezoning we've done in the past, allowing being more creative and permissive with our developers and our builders, if they're willing to provide an affordable housing component, allowing them to build in areas and zoning that or zones that are not necessarily permitted if you don't have an affordable housing component. We've done that just a few months ago. I think that's a good idea. As far as I don't want to cause an uproar. I am going to vote to keep the appeal going for the oil and gas lawsuit. That's not the issue. However, in the event that we would lose, I also think that it's a good idea to maybe set aside some money for, I think the mineral rights idea is a good idea. If at some point the city begins collecting monies off the lands and the mineral rights that we own, I think that a portion of that should be dedicated to this affordable housing fund. I don't have any data to back up what that number would be, but I think that if we started there and basically said, hey, we'll put $500,000 a year in off our mineral rights, I think that would be a good way to go. Now, in no way is that to bribe the public or anyone else to say, hey, we're not going to go ahead and uphold the city charter or the city constitution or whatnot. It's just to say, in the event that something happens down the road, it'd be nice to actually pre-dedicate those funds to something like the Affordable Housing Fund. And then also, I think that we should instruct city staff to look at creative ways. We've got the CDBG funds. I share Councilmember Levison's sentiment. I don't think we should dedicate them all to affordable housing, but we've got city staff members, one who's right here. I think that we should ask her to say, okay, if we were going to peel off with your expertise and your heart and your experience, how much would you recommend we peel off and just dedicate to an affordable housing fund? I also think that we should do a general fund set aside. I don't know if that's $1 or if it's $10 million a year, but a general fund set aside would be a good idea. And I think we'd look to the city manager and the staff and say, again, how much could you peel off? I also think that we should look at the Housing and Human Services Advisory Fund. The 1.6% that we pull off, I don't think that should all go towards affordable housing. But having sat in and seen where those dollars go, if we just said, look, we're going to peel off 10% of your 1.6% and dedicated that towards affordable housing, that's another little piece. So I think that without a tax or without going to the public to ask for a tax, I think that we've got areas, couch cushions to search, so to speak. And it doesn't seem impossible or improbable to me with a $320 million a year budget, which is $3.2 billion over 10 years, that we can't come up with $10 million. Just seems we should be able to do that. And so I also like the idea of the voluntary fund, is another component. We mentioned and talked about that before. And last but not least, so these are all things I think we can do immediately. And we could just say, look, establish the fund it this way, bring back the details later because city staff knows a lot more than we do. And I also, just for kicks and grins, think that along with that proposal, I think we should also say, look, if we forced you to come up with $1 million a year somehow, some way, where would you cut? And so I think that if we actually started the fund, did these things that it sounds like we're all talking about, and then also have the option just to bring it, where would we cut if we wanted to fund the full $1 million every year? I think that'd be a great place to start. And then I also think that I've been speaking with concerned members of the public, and they don't want it. The biggest backers for affordable housing don't want it to go to a vote this November because they fear that there's not enough time between now and November in order to educate the public as to the needs of the city. And I would agree. So I also expressed my sentiment to these individuals that I think it's a good idea that if we can't come up with the funding for the fund, either through suggestion A, which was the list of what we're all talking about, B, gun to your head, $1 million a year, then option C would be, if we can't fund it, then not this November, but the following November, we do a sales tax for the public with the numbers that were mentioned tonight. I personally think, not being an expert in this issue, but having kind of just listened to everything over the last several months, I think that's the direction we should go in.
Very good. Councilmember Christensen, can you let Councilmember Santos and Moore go first because they haven't spoken yet, and then come in. Sure. Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I'm trying to get my thoughts back from listening to Councilmember Bagley pontificate a lot of the things I was going to say as well.
I suck intelligence up people.
Well, we know that. Question I have is, how many affordable units do we have coming online? I'm looking right at Joni or Kathy.
According to the map that you were given, there's about 254 planned.
254 planned for within the next year or two?
Well, within the ones that are somewhere in the development process.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Roughly a year or two. Looking over Journey. She's giving me the head nod. Okay. So, the other question I have, since we've been talking about set-asides, and everyone is now working on the budget, good time. This is a new item, potentially, that I would tend to agree with. I also tend to look at what other areas where we fund or other agencies that get money from the city, where can we pull back to help to get to the full $1 million. I'm not necessarily saying cut the 10% of the Housing and Human Services budget. That's city council budget, yeah. Our big budget. But I think all options for that need to be on the table. Having been one of the only council member left to vote down the inclusionary zoning, and I agree, it was not a very good plan. Because the question I have is, so with all the cash in lieu that we have gotten, I know we've issued grants to first-time homeowners, education classes, but where were the partnerships with developers to develop affordable housing? Did we ever, besides Longmont Housing Authority, did we ever put any other money aside to any other developer that came to the city to do that? And if so, I think that's something that hasn't been spoken about, because if we did, great. Perhaps we can continue that same thing. And Kathy's nodding yes, we have done that before. But you don't hear about it as much. You hear about, well, we need to have, this inclusionary zoning 10%. It's got to be citywide. I would also agree with the construction defects. We talked about this to Dr. Cog. Heard about it at CML. Other mayors and council members throughout the state. Each city is looking at it. Luckily for us, we won't be at the front of the bus on this one, because that ship has sailed in other communities as far as undoing the construction defects state law bill. And as we know, our residents have, we've overturned Senate Bill 152 for telecommunications, and it's doing great things for us here. I have no problems with the incentives that have been thought of. The delay of the fee for the certificate of occupancy has been talked about even before I got on council. Those incentives, I think, as well as if we're going to dedicate a fund, and I'm looking at Jim, we wouldn't have to create a new fund. We could just potentially put it into the Affordable Housing Fund, and I'm getting the nod yes. So that part of the brain damage is done. And I would agree, Councilmember Bagley and with the mayor and Councilmember Finley, there are some things we can do right away. My only concern is, how do we go about kicking this off for fiscal year 2016?
So, Council, if I can jump in, one of the things that we've actually been talking about in this budget process, the question of the affordable housing and some type of potential financial contribution from the general fund has been something that we've been talking about. Jim and I have been talking about as we head into the budget process. I will tell you that as we move into the budget process, we were prepared for, I believe it was a July 14th date, where that was one of the issues that we were going to talk about with you all in terms of setting some high priorities for the budget. One of the things that is a little bit different there this year than in previous, or different now compared to the last two budgets, is the fact that the property tax valuations are coming in this budget cycle, which does change that dynamic as we're moving forward. So it is something that we're looking at. Can we say there's $1 million just in that fund? Probably not. Can we say there is some dollars potentially available? I think there is a possibility there. Then I think we take all of these other components and essentially create a lot of building blocks that we start stacking on each other to say, here's where we think we can end up. And part of that is also to have the conversation using the priority-based budgeting system that says, here's what we're doing.
Right.
And what does that look like? So that has been part of our planning for the 2016 budget process that we were going to talk to you all about.
And that has into consideration the budget deficit gap, the gap that we have.
Correct.
Okay.
We're looking at all those issues.
All right. So there, I'm a little bit more, have a little bit more confident that you guys have already been discussing that and getting that done. So with the sales tax and mill levy, I would not, again, would not be. We already tax groceries, and I've heard about it from a lot of people. Why do you tax groceries? I don't think it would fly this year, Mayor, and I don't think it would fly in 16 either. But I would also say you can't take it off the table.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. I'm just saying.
I agree with you. Yeah, you can't take it off the table. Eventually, another council down the line may end up doing that. Thank you.
I think it's important that we don't direct staff to put these building blocks together in a prescribed way. They're the experts. They know. We say, here's the building blocks we want you to use, and let you figure out the percentages and the best way to put those blocks together for your structure. Because I don't think we should, at this point, as council, try to micromanage, because you guys know a hell of a lot more than we do anyway. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. So a lot of the same things have been said over and over again, so I won't go too much into repeating stuff, but that was going to be one of the things I was going to ask of city staff was to, if we were to look at the general fund for putting together a set aside to support this type of housing, what programs would be cut off at the other end, at the end of the year or whatever. And because we don't really know what that would be yet, and we've got this tier 3 and tier 4 discussion a couple of times, and whether or not those programs should be sustained in the city, and whether this is a high enough priority that they should displace some of those other programs. And so I'd like to see what the impact to some of the other programs we already have would be. The construction defects ordinance would be something I'd be interested in. I won't support a sales tax or a property tax. One of the things we haven't talked about at all tonight is that no matter what we end up doing, it could easily be 7 years out before we get our first unit delivered on this new program, just because it takes 3 years to build it. It takes a couple of years for the city to catch up with the funding opportunities that we're going to need. So we aren't really creating any housing in the next, that's not already in the pipeline, by doing what we're doing tonight or in the next 6 months. And that, in my mind, is not really helping the situation at all either. So the Longmont Housing Authority has leveraged funds at about a 9-to-1 ratio. That seems to me like we should be looking at them to say, we want you to start a new project next year. And how we could help with that would be to make some property available or some funding available for them to go out and buy property, or forgive the loan that we gave them last year for purchasing property at the 17th and Hover site. Things like that we haven't really even talked about tonight, and that would probably get us units in 3 years. And so that's just another idea to throw out on the table, and see where we can take that and let them run with their ability to leverage money at that ratio. And this spot inclusionary zoning is kind of I guess you wouldn't call it spot inclusionary zoning, but specific inclusionary zoning is an idea that sounds pretty intriguing to me, and I'd like to know more about it. So I think that when we talk about timing, we're not even considering that with what we're even talking about tonight, even with the sales tax. it'll be a year before we know what the revenue really is. And so we have to start sometime, and we could have a project started next year if we did something with Longmont Housing Authority and get some general fund support overall.
Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mayor. This problem is a national problem, but right now the only thing we're dealing with is Longmont, but it is also a regional problem, and there are ways to leverage what we're doing here regionally because Boulder County also has a 10-year plan to end homelessness and provide affordable housing, which we can leverage. Kathy, I was going to ask you, since Councilman Santos asked you how many affordable housing units were coming in, how many are going out of affordability?
So while she's looking for that number, one of the things, when she said the 252, that's what we know is in the system. We're hearing that there may be others, but they're not officially in the system where we can say we know for a fact that they're coming in. So I think that's also something, as Kathy indicated, we're going to have to evaluate as we're continuing to move through the process.
So about 154 of the 1,582 units could go out at any time. They're on year-to-year annual renewal kinds of things.
Right.
And another 227 could go out, we could lose in the next 10 years. So a total of about 370.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's exactly why we need something like the affordable housing easement and a few of those things. We're supposed to be sort of checking out things that we don't think are useful. So I would agree actually with all of the mandates. This is a shared problem and we need shared solutions. And if each entity in this city gave a little bit, then we could solve this with a lot less pain overall. So I would suggest that we adopt, I would approve of all of the production tool mandates. I would approve of the height waiver as far as the incentives. I would approve of height waivers and density bonuses if they were very carefully analyzed for the housing, because I've seen neighborhoods in Denver and in San Francisco and in Longmont too destroyed by people putting in huge dense things that really destroy the character of the neighborhood. Parking reduction, I think, is going to be very problematic and cause neighborhood problems, and I think expedited development review is just asking for a lot of problems, because we've already had problems with that, we've already had problems that we know about. And dropping development standards, I think, is also a quality issue too. There are development standards in place for good reason. As far as the modifications and variances, I'm not necessarily against those, but I think we have to be very careful, because the way we get money in this town is fees, and when we waive all these fees, unless we are actually getting a benefit from them in terms of affordable housing, then we're actually putting ourselves behind. So I really would prefer not to do any of the modifications and variances listed. I think under the city policy tools, I think we should pursue those, although I think we have to be very careful, as I said, about upzoning, rezoning, and redevelopment, but we can do those creatively, and as Councilman Bagley mentioned, that's been successful, I think, with the recent LHA rezoning of that area. The revenue generating tools, when I look at these and I see the matrix of what has high impact and low impact, these were all sort of classified as low impact, but I think that, as I said, if we all give little tiny increments from each of these, it would be very helpful. The only ones that I don't really agree with are the dedicated sales tax and taking money from the CDGB, which I think is vulnerable enough, and taking money from the CDGB and taking money from Health and Human Services these are the most vulnerable. These fund the most vulnerable things that we have. I don't think that's at all a wise idea. I would suggest one thing that we could implement pretty quickly is on our utility bills. We could ask people if they would like to donate $1 or $2 a month from their into their utility bills. I've received other utility bills for phones when they ask you if you want to voluntarily do that. And we have that on our taxes, in fact, and I think it may not be much, but it's something, and it would generate people feeling involved, feeling like they're doing something. And it's something we could do right away. I think because this is a continuum from homelessness, there isn't affordable housing, as we've heard, people become homeless. We need to do something right away so the Johnstons don't become homeless. We need so the people aren't living in their car. We could join the Mayor's Challenge to End Homelessness and the Mayor's Challenge to End Veteran Homelessness. The Mayor's Challenge to End Veteran Homelessness has been enormously successful, and it comes, if we started there, we have something like 10 people, I think, who would be eligible for that. That comes with federal dollars, and it comes with additional federal veterans dollars, and that would be a very good way to close things, help things at the very bottom of things. I would also like to thank Mr. Regal for coming, because he emphasized the importance of home ownership. If we become just a city of renters, we become a different city. I would like to read something from Adriana Nunez and her two daughters, who just moved into 818 Terry Street last weekend with a Habitat for Humanity house. And this is the difference between renting and owning a home. She now owns a home. She said, "This opportunity means so much to me and my girls because we're going to be able to better our lives. We're going to be able to get enough sleep, to bake and cook when we want to shower without a schedule, to invite our friends over, to have our own privacy, and to not be bouncing from house to house." That's the difference between owning a home and building equity and getting out of poverty and continually having to pay 30-50% of your rent for just to live, just to have a roof over your head. I think that's really important for us to remember, that we want people, these are homes. They're not really just housing stock. They're homes. And that's what we want everybody in Longmont to have, a home.
So now I think we're on round two. There's a couple of things on the first round that I didn't have the chart up that you provided us. As far as the variances, I do agree that we should look at the fee delay, paying the fees until certificate of occupancy, except we need to make sure that if there's a project that's half built, that we don't waive those fees if it becomes half built for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, because the city does need those fees for the water and sewer development funds. So I would put some kind of a caveat on it, because otherwise we become the carrying costs for the developer. So I think that if we do some of these incentives, the city does not become the bank for the developer. And then looking at fee waivers and fee offsets, I think I would consider those in some limited circumstances. After all, when the council released people under those covenants that we had for homeowners, the city had put in $30,000 worth of fee waivers or paid that we never recouped when we let people out early from their deed restricted covenants, and that was a big loss for the Affordable Housing Fund. So I would want, if we did that, make sure we have some kind of a clawback mechanism. If somehow they say, well, we don't have enough people to rent at the low income level, then we have to go to the next, like, instead of 50% AMI, go up to 80%. I think we should have an appropriate mechanism of clawback fees. The one thing under revenue generating tools that you did not include here that I mentioned in May is to take a look at adding an additional small fee to when we issue building permits. That, I think I mentioned that to see if, for example, someone's doing a major renovation on their house, couldn't it be appropriate that we'd add a small fee onto that building permit? And that could be, that would also cover renovations of buildings and not just new construction, and that wasn't included here. And I don't know, do you have any idea why we have all of these incentives in place and people are not taking advantage of them? In that one chart you said, here's all the things we do, and you had a lot of, yes, we do this, yes, we offer density bonuses, parking reduction, all these other things, and it doesn't seem like people are taking advantage. So do you think if they're already there, adding these other tools is going to make them used more?
It comes down to floors and ceilings. What's the floor of entitlement? What's the ceiling of entitlement? And where's the market within that? And what's can a developer actually get a return on requesting the additional density bonus, height, what have you? And to date, the Longmont market has not had sufficient pressure to warrant those requests. I think it's very interesting to think about the future. What's happening with the city of Longmont? It's transitioning from a greenfield development community to a infill development community. And as that happens, as we think about how these tools take shape over the next multiple years, it could look different. And there could be greater market pressure, particularly inside certain corridors, and these tools might become more effective over time.
And I guess I would like to see if there was, we could do some kind of a development template for maybe a project. I'd want to see what a project, if we incorporated certain of these things we've all agreed with, what would that project look like? What would that template look like? Would it be, a 1 or 2 acre parcel, and if you utilized everything the city already had in the toolkit, and then some of these additional things, is it something that could be absolutely buildable? And I want to know if it's going to be practical, because if we could add all these other things in, throw a bunch of money out of the general fund. I mean, if it was only a matter of throwing money at it, we could have pulled money out of the general fund any number of these years. And in the future, we could direct, staff for 2016 to pull money out of the general fund. But when it comes down to, programs and everything else, depends on, all that additional property tax revenue because of assessments going up. We don't really know how much that is going to be realized, because a lot of people are fighting their assessment increases this year. So I think that any council at any time can change anything. And so I think going into the future, if we want to establish something that's going to be long-lasting in a program, then I'd like to see, what could we do by, the 1 year mark, as Councilmember Morris pointed out. If we threw a bunch of money at something and said to Longmont Housing Authority, here's, $2 million, what could you do with it in the next 3 years? I'd like to see where could we be 2 years from now, like in 2018, having 2 years of set-asides in the budget, and then what could be realized. And unless we're going to get there with some plan, other councils could just say, well, you know what, this year it's more important not to raise rec fees than to build a bunch of housing, because our kids need recreation.
Mayor, one additional comment in regards to the density bonus and variances. For instance, with like a PUD, there are several, like 17, I think, different things you can do to get a density bonus, and affordable housing is only one of those. And so it's for market rate development, affordable housing is probably the hardest thing to do. And so if you allow several things to get you a density bonus, it kind of devalues the possibility of getting affordable housing. And so one thing could be looking at, only allowing variances or density bonus if it's for affordable housing and not other community amenities that you currently allow variances for.
If I can give you a practical example, when you talk about something like a height variance, all of a sudden, so if you add a floor, then if you change it from a wood construction to steel construction, that in itself may change the cost dynamic. So on some of those are the nuances that you get into that says, why are certain folks using certain pieces of the puzzle? And I think that's where, as part of the review, we have to review that puzzle and understand why aren't they using it, because it may be tiered to in certain respects in order to get folks to utilize it. But I wanted to give you a practical example that I've heard about recently.
Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Just briefly, the Longmont Housing Authority and the current Affordable Housing Fund, just in layman's terms, 60 seconds or less, how does currently the city and the Longmont Housing Authority work together?
I'm glad you asked that question. Now, I would like to give an overview of what we've done with the Affordable Housing Fund to date, because I think we probably haven't done a good job of really explaining that or helping you to understand. So since the Affordable Housing Fund was begun and set up in 1995, 1996, the city has contributed about $1.8 million to that fund. The developers contributed $4.4 million, and we have revolved it to the tune of $3.2 million. So we've almost matched what the developers put in by lending it out and getting it back in again. So that's a total of about $9.6 million or so. $8 million has been lent out to date, total, and we have received a total of 901 units have been created. 791 rental units and 110 owner units. So that's just from the fund. That's not from the CDBG, although some CDBG funds might be in some of the projects, but it is through partnerships with Habitat for Humanity, with the Housing Authority and their sister organization, the Housing Development Corporation, Thistle Community Housing, let's see who else is on here, not Imagine, ASI, blanking, Accessible Spaces, Inc., who did a project just for persons with disabilities. We've done some general rehab, so owner-occupied rehab. The Boulder County Housing Authority has been a partner. So a number of different elements have been brought into that in partnerships. So overall, the funds that have been lent out, we've averaged, our subsidy has been about $10,000 per unit. So if we're trying to raise $1 million a year, we should be able to get about 100 units, give or take.
Okay. And then, so my next question is, based on your experience, and I know that city staff hates these kind of questions, but you, Kathy, based on your experience and your understanding of the problem, is the current Affordable Housing Fund the right vehicle where we, regardless of how we raise this money, is that where we put the money? Is that what you would do if you were one of us?
Yes, I think it's the simplest and easiest and most effective mechanism that we have right now, because we have local control. Then we can set the parameters around what we want the program to be. It can adjust according to the market. So if the need right now is for rental housing at such and such, that's what we put out in our RFPs, that we want applications for that type of a product. If it changes and in 3 years it's for sale housing affordable at X, then that's what we adjust to. So we can be much more nimble in addressing what the local needs are and react to that. I think the only question is, is it just the fund like we have now, or is it more of a trust fund? In which case you're setting aside principal and you are delaying what you can do with it, but you're growing that principal and you're only then operating off of interest that's generated from that.
But what you just said, though, but it's all an asset, right? We still have $9.6 million in the fund, correct? We just lend it out.
That's what has revolved over the years, yes.
That's
That's not what's in the fund right this
How much
minute.
is in the fund right this minute?
Well, 9 million less the 8 million that's gone out, so
$1
that's
million?
probably under
Okay.
$1 million.
So I guess which leads me to my next question, point, et cetera. I hear what Councilmember Moore is saying. I've expressed, I think we need to act now. Let's get things going. However, I think that we need to do that, but I also think that the end game here is to develop an economic engine that will go on in perpetuity. Right now, if we took a snapshot, we've got affordable housing, and we're doing stuff with it. And if you were to go back in time, I'll bet people would say, you've really improved. If you fast forward another 10, 20 years, there still is going to be a demand for affordable housing, and we will have improved, but future city council members and our citizens are going to be having the same discussion. I would like to build an engine that we just say, look, let's go ahead and pump the money in. I personally would be more in line with a hybrid, a trust fund, that we use the money as we go along, but also build a principal amount that could be held in reserve and kind of, grown that way, like a traditional foundation, so to speak. And then I also think that just random thoughts. I'm not for forgiving fees necessarily as one of the incentives. There were a few developers that came forward and pulled on our ear and basically said, hey, we want to have breakfast with you. What in the world are you doing giving incentives? We do it without fees. It's possible. Look. And then laid out what they do. I think, and I don't want to mention any names in case I get them in trouble with their friends, but it seems that it might be a little bit more possible than what we've been thinking to do things on an affordable level or in an affordable manner without basically giving them fee waivers. And so it's possible. So I would be probably less likely to encourage that kind of incentive. And then last but not least, my question is, okay, so what do we do now? I mean, tonight, I view tonight as the night that we're going to do something. So let's do something rather than saying, okay, we'll talk to you in a month or two. I want to do something.
So we need direction from council in terms of what you want us to look at and what you don't want us to look at. Frankly, it may be easier for you all to say, here's what we, as a group, you all feel you don't want us to look at based on how I've heard this conversation. But we do need that direction so we can move forward with our analysis. And Kathy has a summary of some comments if you want to go over that, but at the end we do need that motion.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. So I guess for the practical matter in me, we talk about this catch-up, keep-up thing. I don't see that as having any bearing on anything. I think what we have here is a situation of how much revenue can we dedicate to different kinds of housing, whether it be affordable or mid-range housing to allow people to actually buy their home, for example, and at lower than market rate currently is. And what can we afford, and how many units will that produce on an annual basis? And if we keep it at a steady number, that number that we deliver is going to decline because of inflation. So to pick a number or to say we're going to either catch up or keep up, I think is irrelevant. I think what's relevant is that how many units can we deliver with this much money? And that's really the bottom line. And how we get there is a combination of all of these tools. So while we continue to talk about this, I still think that we have to keep in mind that when we say affordable housing, it doesn't mean that low income. It means that 50 to 80% range too. And we have to make sure that we don't lose sight of that in the long conversation.
I was interested in what Councilman Bagley said because we do need to have an engine for providing the funding for this. But one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that Terry Ishan was talking about income inequality. The reason things are not affordable is because of income inequality, which has risen dramatically over the last 30 years in this country. And if we keep building low-income houses, we'll never, keep thinking that we can just build low-income housing. We're fooling ourselves, because unless we can generate better-paying jobs for this city, it's an endless round of trying to build more and more cheap housing or affordable housing for low-income people. We need to generate a lot more better jobs. We have 35% of the people here leaving town every day to find a better job, to find something that pays more. According to the report we got at the end of the year from Jim Golden, the net number of new jobs added in Longmont was 24. According to LAEC, the net number that they added was 327. In either case, for 91,000 people, that's not enough. So we really have to address both of these hand in hand so that we don't have to keep trying to play catch up. The housing will be affordable because people have better jobs, better wages. And that's the income inequality really is at the heart of this. We have people who are paid a great deal of money, and then we have the rest of us. And that sort of skews everything. So if we, as part of this initiative, we need to be providing for both. We need to consider the homeless people at one end, but we also need to be generating better paying jobs in Longmont as a part of not having to keep putting money into developing affordable housing.
Councilmember Levinson.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I'd like to suggest, since you've given us this summation page on the toolkit page, which has this production tools, mandates, incentives, if we could make this a really heck of a lot easier for you, if you could get us 7 copies of that, and we sit here at our desk and we cross through the ones we don't like, and the ones that we sort of like, we give a check mark or a star, and the ones we really like, we give 2 stars to, or something. But I think that would give you a summation that's very simple and very clear, and probably more precise than how quickly you were scribbling when people went down the list. And I think many of us identified that summation page, and we're working from that. So that's my suggested, Mayor, that we all look at page 2 of the toolkit. This one, right? That one. Yep. And if you can get us 7 copies of that, maybe we can make life a little easier for you.
Why don't we just vote?
Well, straight up, I mean, there's so many items.
Yeah, we'll just go through and
raise our
hand, and 4 to 3.
I think it's easy.
So, I mean,
well, we could do it fast. Yeah.
Mayor.
Yes.
Just to clarify, we've got a list. The one I'm looking at happens to be on page 12. We can compare it. But I think our pagination might be off.
Page 88.
It says toolkit of options. It's the second page of toolkit of options.
Page 88 of the packet.
That's the one.
88.
That's the one. I'm sure about this here. Yeah, here's paid for 40 people.
So it's,
I mean, if I had a printer, I could send this to a printer. I'd have to cross it stuff.
And it also does also non-inclusive.
Yeah.
No. Not because we talked about
all right, Aaron is making copies of what you had on your screen.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Kathy, do you have a list? You were taking notes of everything we talked about. Can we just have a general, instead of having everyone run around and trying to make copies, can we get a just general understanding of what you heard, and then we can base a motion off of that?
So what I heard consensus around, or seeming consensus, is the construction defects law, to take a look at what we could explore and bring back around that.
Okay.
I heard that the general fund set aside, whether that's a dollar amount or a percentage or an increment, what might that look like as far as, and what implications would it have on other areas of the general fund? And also looking at the Human Service Agency set aside, is there anything that could be set aside among that for affordable housing, and what would that look like, and what are the implications? I heard targeted inclusionary housing ordinance. What could that look like, and where might it address some of the issues? Incentives seem to be fairly well received, but look at what changes might be needed, and maybe tier them according to what is most effective down to least effective kinds of things to then bring back again. And then continuing to, and maybe I added this one, but continuing to ensure the Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan update requires or includes diverse housing, and that document itself will also help increase or provide an increment of value for the incentives, depending on what happens with that. So that, I think last time, if you remember me saying, we're going to have to bring some of this stuff back because we aren't going to know the answers and the implications until we get through the comp plan update and amendment. So, and that really does have, as Harold indicated, an impact on the values that the incentives might have because of where we choose to set those floors and ceilings for some of the incentives. So those are the main places I heard that there seemed to be consensus.
Mayor, if I may, Kathy, I also heard, just going through my notes, support for a concept of the easement to preserve and maintain current.
You may have heard it from one or two people, but I didn't hear it from other members of council.
Okay.
Because I'm not for an easement. I never mentioned that.
Right.
We'd have to vote on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I mean,
That's something.
Rezoning also came up. I don't know if it was unanimous, but it came up with several.
So that's the thing. Were you writing about about a consensus of what council was saying?
Yes, where it seemed to be like the majority of folks
Instead of an
had
overall
mentioned
view?
things as
No.
well. And the rezoning I would put as a possible in that incentive package. So.
Okay. All right.
So instead of going through, I know there's copies.
You can do it if you want. I just thought it would make it easier. The stuff we don't want to, nobody talked about commercial linkage or residential linkage because it sucks.
Yeah,
mandates are out. So.
Yeah.
I'm not for mandates.
So why don't we do this?
So I move what the list that Kathy has written.
Okay, and then
Kathy,
we can
hold on
vote
to that
on
list.
specific things.
So I would move the list that you compiled.
Second.
All right. I agree. Councilmember Levison?
Yeah, I guess some of the stuff like the affordable housing easement, I mean, some people didn't talk about it. Some people chose to talk about it, but I'd like to see what kind of costs we're looking at because a lot of these things do come with a price tag, and I guess that's one of those clarifying points that we need to take a look at.
Well, why don't we vote on what we kind of all had general consensus that Kathy just described, and then if there's specific things that we want to vote on that we don't all agree on, we can. So, okay, so let's vote on that. Okay, that passes 6-1 with Councilmember Christensen dissenting. Councilmember Christensen. Oops. Oh, okay. So affordable housing easement, that was brought up as,
What would it look like?
yeah. Yeah. So basically, it's like reserving those things.
It's applying funds to preserve existing inventory, whether it's restricted and at the risk of expiring, those restrictions expiring, whatever they may be state or federal, or even existing buildings that are at risk of condo conversion, for example,
Right.
where the city could step in and preserve it as rental. I mean, that's the option, is to preserve.
Right. Councilmember Weldon?
Because I think that the no-brainer answer is that if it's cheaper to preserve versus cheaper to build, we just do what's economically effective and efficient.
Yeah, the easement's like any other easement. The difference is instead of paying for an easement for a water line, you're paying for the easement for the affordability piece on whatever property you're talking about.
So I think that should be a toolkit that we throw in there. It doesn't become necessarily a policy that we always do the easement, but
Yeah.
if somebody's willing to take $2 to put an easement on their property and give us 1,000 units of affordable housing, let's do it. So I just think we just need to look at it on a case-by-case basis. But I move that we put it in the toolkit.
Okay. Councilmember Christensen?
Yes, I'd recommend that we keep it in there too, because otherwise we're just continuing to recreate the same thing over and over and over again. And this way, we preserve something instead of continually starting from scratch, which doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
Then second the motion. Somebody?
Second.
Is that something we need to vote on, or do we just have general consensus?
Toolkit.
Okay, yeah. Okay, let's vote on whether the affordable housing easement is part of the toolkit on a case-by-case basis. Yeah. Okay. That passes 7-0. Something that I still think we're missing is if someone's building wanted to build these miniature homes, I think we need to have standards, because it sounded like to me that Councilman Christensen wanted to take that off the table, but I think yeah. Okay. Councilmember Santos?
Thank you, Mayor Gibbs. You mean like the micro homes that
Yeah.
they use in Madison, Wisconsin? Is that right, Sandy? We talked about that, yeah. So I wouldn't mind getting some information on that. I see that some people are living in very small quarters, but I'd like to get information about that, how it would work, and where we would allow them to be. Some HOA, you've mentioned HOA covenants before, would not allow perhaps that type of dwelling on their property for rental or whatever, but just some information about how that program is working. As Sandy and I have talked about before, the one in Madison, Wisconsin seems to be pretty prevalent.
Having watched Tiny House hunting last night, will admit it.
There's a show?
Yeah, there is. Yeah. Anyway, a lot of these homes are on essentially a flatbed, and just the mere construction of them, you can't do it for less than $20,000 to $40,000, and you're talking about 190 square feet sometimes. Well, that's the examples they gave last night. Even a couple that built their own, still for 190 square feet, it cost them $20,000, and that does not include water and sewer hookups, and a lot of them, if you go off the grid, you have to provide for yourself. So my question is, if you're going to consider tiny homes, there's the construction part, and then there's the infrastructure part, and is it much different than somebody rolling up an RV and parking it in a backyard? It's a mobile home just because it wasn't custom built, if it was made in the Winnebago factory, is it just as legitimate as if it was made in a tiny house factory? And so I know that in certain neighborhoods there have been code enforcement issues with people pulling up RVs and renting an RV that's situated in a backyard. And it doesn't really address necessarily what we're looking at is to count as a housing unit if it's that mobile. I mean, could you count that as an affordable unit if somebody pulls up an RV and allows somebody to live in it in a backyard, not hooked up to water and sewer, and count that as a housing unit? And that's something we're going to look at. So I see the expression on people's faces. It's horror. But, I mean, there is, that possibility. If you're not in a covenant-controlled neighborhood and you have a large lot, or if you're an annexed piece of property and there are several of them, that you could have a village of RVs living there, I guess. So that's just for tiny house.
So, Mayor, if I can, that actually comes into the LACP, the comprehensive plan update, and the land uses, and then the rezoning component of what they talked about. And so all of those issues have to be taken into account. That's really the mechanism where that conversation would take place. But if council wants, they can make a motion and say, look at that.
I could add one point. It also kind of get into the idea of your development standard variances, because a mini home on a large lot might not be worth it to somebody. So often they'll want to seek smaller lots, and you guys have lot size minimums in certain zoning districts, and so it would come along with some development standard variances or changes that you'd have to consider, which could have negative effects in terms of how other people use that standard. So it's something to consider, but it is somewhat complicated.
Well, I guess I don't know if we need to, let's just address that in our comprehensive plan and not specifically address that tonight would be my. Yeah.
Oh, well, I just have to have a little bit of comment about tiny houses. I do think, I think we're all very charmed by the tiny house thing. None of us would actually want to live in a tiny house. I live in a house that's 750 square foot. That's tiny enough for two people. But that was considered a very good-sized house in 1941 when it was built for 4. So we've changed our standards. And I think there's in terms of what was suggested with Michael Reese's letter to us, was just being creative. I don't think the tiny houses really address very much the issue of density, and that's what we actually need. What we might consider is using innovative materials like storage containers that are stacked, it sounds dreadful, but I've been to a very trendy little area down in Denver that has a wonderful group of storage containers that are retail and also housing, and it works very well. We just need to I think the idea is to loosen up a little bit. And by the way, as Councilman Santos mentioned, the Madison, Wisconsin tiny houses were built for $3,000 a piece, but they were also built by the homeless people who were going to occupy them, which is a wonderful idea because it is exactly what Habitat for Humanity does. When people build their own or have something to do with building their own homes, it's a great benefit to everybody, and especially them. Anyway, I think that tiny houses is just part of a conversation about how to consider different rezoning as part of the comprehensive plan, and more creative use of materials and of arrangements, things like co-housing and various things like that, address more innovative housing and also higher density. It's pretty hard to get the tiny houses well, you can get them pretty close, but I find them charming. I don't think they really are going to help the housing crunch that we have, though. Thank you.
Councilman Anderson.
Yes, and I think when we're looking at the development standards, I know that in some of the older neighborhoods that were built pre-development standards, we would have houses that were on 2 lots, and it was family members, and they would share a water and sewer line. Something like that for affordable units might be a good idea to save costs. However, in those neighborhoods where they have shared water and sewer and no one has known about it, what comes up in your drain in your basement could be what happens in your next door neighbor's house. And I think that, when we're looking at development standards, there are ways that you can save costs, but, not holding to what a current development standard would be for example, water and sewer lines, could come at a very high cost, 30, 50 years later. So I caution what we're going to be doing for these kind of incentives.
Councilman Santos. Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Kathy, you guys got what you got? You guys got what you need? You have what you need?
I guess it would be helpful if we knew what we definitely don't want to explore any further. So I don't know if we quickly.
I think the list that you got was the list that we want to move forward with.
Okay, with the addition of the affordable housing easement to
Yes.
explore that. Okay, that's fine. Absolutely.
We all, I can nods, yes, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want the occupational tax, head tax, or excise tax. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Legislative update. Get this done and go home. Thanks, Kevin.
So we'll get together and we'll figure out when and how we can bring this back, and we'll give you an update at some point of when it'll start rolling out.
Figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
All right. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Mayor Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager, is here for your final item. It's the final 2015 legislative update.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break.
Good job, Mayor. You shepherded us through that one pretty good. I'm really not.
Wow.
Sandy cleared out the building.
Let's go home. Yeah, I have a cheering section in the back.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sure nobody's watching at home.
I'm sure.
You're red.
Yeah. Nope. All right, Mayor. Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager, and I am here with your legislative update for this session. So the 2015 legislative session adjourned on May 6th, and they went through 621 bills. Interesting that was actually a lot more than last year. We actually had a lot more bills going on this year, even though we had a divided House and Senate, which always leads for fun conversations, and also not a lot of bills passed, which is okay with me. Out of those, we ended up, let's see here, they did 762 bills this year, 621 last year. We tracked 165 bills total, and you all took positions on just a few of those. You remained neutral on one bill, and that was the one on urban renewal that CML had proposed. It died. It was postponed indefinitely. We opposed 5 bills, and 3 of those died, and then 2 were signed by the governor, one of those being the other urban renewal bill, which I'm going to give you a little more information on tonight, as promised. And we supported 4 bills, one of which passed. So this is the worst tracking section I've ever had with a 44% success rate. So my apologies sort of about that. But the summary is in your packet with all the different bills and how that worked and what happened to each of those individual bills.
Quick question, Sandy.
Yes.
On the bills that we opposed and supported, where did our representatives vote?
Well, some of these were ones that our representatives sponsored. So if you were to go down the list, the public bodies and urban renewal, I believe that everybody voted against that, that were our representatives that were taking a look at that in the House side, although it didn't even make it past Finance Committee. So I think that's only Mike Foote, and he actually voted for it. The fracking ban, again, that was Mike Foote on Committee on State Veterans and Military Affairs. He voted against all of the fracking bills, and they died in committee. The indemnity of public construction contracts, this is the one that you guys were sort of just talking about around, this was one of them. There were 2 or 3 of them, but the construction defects bill, this was one, the indemnity of public construction contracts, was one that the governor signed. I think our legislators voted for it, even though we were against it. This adds an additional problem when it comes to the purchasing process and essentially allows designers and architects sort of off the hook when it comes to liability later on.
The big one that I'm hoping is 1348.
1348 did make it through both houses, and Mike Foote, Representative Mike Foote voted against it, Representative Jonathan Singer voted for it, and Senator Jones voted for it. That was their record on this.
It would be good to remember when they come back and ask for support of bills that while we vehemently opposed 1348, that our representatives did not listen. That's the one I wanted to get to.
And, sort of similarly, the local government input on liquor sales, the one that kind of deals with the zoning issues and being able to have some local input on brewery licenses, that one was sponsored by Jonathan Singer, and we supported it, and it was signed by the governor, so that one did pass. That's the one that we supported and passed. The other piece that I promised to you all was a little more information about 1348 and what did that look like, what does that do? Mayor Pro Tem, you asked last time that we met, what does that really mean? And I just kind of want to go through what current thought on this bill is. So essentially 1348, the effective date of 1348 is January 1st of 2016, and it becomes effective, it becomes applicable to your urban renewal project when one of 2 things happens. When one, you have a new urban renewal authority or a new urban renewal project, or you amend or modify an existing plan. What they mean by amend or modify in this case is slightly different than the originating legislation, which talks about substantial modification. In this case, they're talking about if you alter the boundaries, if you extend the plans in size or duration, or add a project. What's weird about that language is that usually a project is assigned, it's usually just one project. So like, for example, our DDA is one project, the DDA. We may have subgroupings and sub-projects and facade improvements and things like that, but it's still one project. So that specific wording actually ends up being moot based on the original legislation. if it does apply, then there's a couple things that you have to do. So for us, Mayor Pro Tem, back to your question from last time, does this affect the Twin Peaks Urban Renewal Authority and project? And the answer is, if we don't extend or change the boundaries or extend or change the timeframes or the financing, then no, this wouldn't apply to that project and wouldn't have to go back and be renegotiated. But if any of those things changed, then it would be subject to 1348.
Or not yet?
Do we have a...
Do we have to put a county commissioner on the...
Not at this time, not unless you decide to change that plan. Now, as the sitting urban renewal authority, at this point, if you start a new TIF area or activate one that has to do with the financing, you can activate an urban renewal authority. You can only take the increment that's sales tax, and it doesn't affect anything, doesn't change any of those things. But if you're going to take the increment, note the increment, not the tax, because we're not taking a tax from another entity. We're taking the increment, which would not exist without the development in the first place. That increment is the piece that then you need to have commissioners. You'd have to add 3 commissioners. You'd have to add 1 that comes from the county, 1 that comes from a combined group of special district people, and 1 from the school board. And so those 3 commissioners would add to you all, which would indeed give you 10 commissioners. So therefore, then the mayor can actually appoint another one so that you have 11 in case of a tie.
I have a question for you. If you're in 2 counties like we are, you have to appoint a commissioner from each county.
So, Mayor Coombs, the question from Councilmember Moore was, if you're in 2 counties like Longmont is, you have to appoint commissioners from both counties. Only if the project itself sits in both counties. Then the answer, we think, is yes, although it's sort of unclear, because it just says 1 from the county of which the urban renewal area is literally situated in. So if we did have something that was right there on that border and somehow constituted County Line Road, it could be challenged if we decided to choose 1 commissioner over the other. I think what's also interesting, and Dave and I were kind of talking about this, is in the area of special districts and metro districts, certainly for Twin Peaks, you have some interesting special and metro districts in there. They're supposed to get together and choose 1 representative. I'm not totally sure how they would do that, but it has to be within the project space. So only the special districts that are affected by that boundary matter. So not only do you have to add 3 commissioners if that were to happen, but also you are required to do binding mediation. This is a new term to me because usually it's either binding arbitration or non-binding mediation. And so far, the lawyers that have taken a look at this have said, yes, that means binding. And what that means is that you can negotiate for up to 120 days. If no negotiation is reached, then the mediator does a finding of fact, and you all may live by those findings of facts. It doesn't really say what happens if you decide not to live by those findings of facts, except that it does determine that it's binding, that the fact finding from the mediator, who has to render that within 90 days of you reaching an impasse, then that becomes sort of the default agreement. And you may agree with it if you choose. So based on that, that essentially adds 120 days of negotiation, adds 90 days of rendering a decision on mediation if you're unable to reach an agreement. It adds a significant amount of time to an urban renewal project, which of course is part of the design, because I do believe that the authors wanted for us to come to very quick agreements around how we're going to share some of those tax increment revenues. And so I think it meets certainly the desires of the sponsor. One other thing that came up is that we started to realize, at least there were several projects where people started to realize that if they refinance, that kicks it into this, and then you have to have commissioners, and you have to renegotiate, and all those kinds of things. And so there was sort of a flurry of emails and veto letters, including ours, to the governor saying, hey, please don't do this. The governor's signing statement said, we are sensitive that participants in existing urban renewal plans should not be concerned that technical interpretation or implementation issues will substantially impair their existing rights or financial expectations. So from that point on, he said, and if there are any problems in the legislation, we will start a task force and we will start to look at different fixes in the next legislative session. That process starts tomorrow. CML is convening a task force in order to take a look at what kinds of technical issues did the bill create, because a lot of the stuff was thrown in at the end. In fact, this bill was introduced 10 days before the end of the session, so there was a lot of stuff that was sort of thrown in at the end that doesn't line up with originating documentation nor with any of the court cases that go along with it. So I'll be attending that meeting tomorrow, and we'll see what happens.
All right.
Any questions on anything that happened this lovely session?
I guess if we're going to change anything, we should do it before January 1st, 2016.
Before January 1st, right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
City manager, any comments?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
Okay. Actually, now it's time for mayor and council comments. Councilmember Finley?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I have a business of the week, as is my custom. My business of the week is Perkins Restaurant at 2051 Main Street. Now, at Perkins Restaurant, you can get great service, family-friendly atmosphere, and if you need to be resuscitated, there might be a former Eagle Scout there, like Councilmember Bagley, and who could come and resuscitate you and make sure you don't die. This is my way of saying that our Councilmember Bagley was the hero of the week. Perkins was the business of the week. That's pretty cool that you saved that woman, and I think that's neat. So you're our hero of the week at our business of the week.
Thanks.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I want to wish everyone a happy Independence Day. And remember, if it flies in the air, you will be fined. That is a very hefty fine in Longmont and in the state of Colorado. So those people that went to Wyoming to get fireworks, I wouldn't shoot them off in the state of Colorado or in the city of Longmont. It's going to cost you big time. So please, everyone, be safe.
Councilmember Wilson.
Thank you. I was absent from last week's meeting because it was graduation week for my younger one, and senior night dinner was Tuesday night. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a report from the CML conference. I caught the tail end of the council meeting where people were commenting, so I think I will echo all of your comments that there were a lot of good things to learn from the conference, and also significantly, I am now off the CML board, and my term was up, and thought that give somebody else a chance because I have 5 months left, and I think we've got a good new CML board that's going to do good things, and I would encourage council members to make sure we have a continuing relationship with the new large city members. So if you don't know who those people are, there's the list. And I also want to make sure everybody has a happy and safe 4th of July. Also want to thank the Skyline Kiwanis who helped do the fireworks. I love fireworks. And it's a very special night to see those fireworks, and I want to extend again my appreciation. And also, it is going to be a big holiday. It's going to be a hot one. I want to encourage people to be careful about their alcohol consumption, about getting into a car afterwards. Also, in general, with this heat wave we're having, for people to take care of themselves. Hydrate, especially the very young, the very old, people with medical conditions. So it's very important. If we get very hot, do we have designated cooling centers in the city that we will put out for people? I don't know. We have stuff like that set up already. Can we make sure that we get that information out, because it's going to be so hot?
We'll make sure that we work with Rigo on that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I guess that ends council comments. City Attorney, any comments?
No comments, Mayor.
All right, this meeting is adjourned.